And we are live. What's up, everybody? Really honored to have two awesome guests today. We're going to be discussing, well, actually, they've probably got a better idea of what we're going to discuss. I think they both have a lot of things on their mind that they want to talk about. We're going to be talking about Orthodox Christianity, veganism, carnivore diet, and whatever else comes up, whatever else the audience wants to talk about. There's a lot of contention between the vegan religion and Christianity. There seems to be a lot of confusion out there over what veganism really is, what it's really all about. There seems to be a lot of confusion out there about orthodoxy and rules around fasting, around diet in general. So I'm really excited to talk to two of my friends. I've got Jay Dyer here, as well as we got Jay Dyer, jaysanalysis.com. What's up, Jay?
What's up, dude? Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Right on, right on. We had some tech issues, but we straightened it all out. We're good to go. We're ready to roll. And I've also got from the channel, the Norwegian Nous, Father Deacon, Dr. Ananias. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me. Blessings of our Lord to all of you, and I'm thrilled to be on Primal Edge Health with Jay Dyer and Tristan.
Right on. All right. So you guys in the audience, tell us if our microphones are way off. Tell us if our mic volumes, if mine's too loud or if theirs isn't loud enough, and I'll adjust it. We got a bunch of people waiting in the chat, a bunch of bigots in the chat hanging out. We're all really excited to talk about this. So I know you guys have been. I guess a good place to start would be with Carnivore, right? A lot of people who've been coming to the channel here are inquiring about getting their health back, inquiring about fixing gut issues, fixing issues with autoimmune conditions. A lot of people's health has been ravaged by kind of the standard Western diet, standard American diet. And a lot of people have found carnivore or ketogenic diets, low carbohydrate diets, as a way to manage blood sugar levels, as a way to manage inflammation. And I know both of you have also come upon carnivore diets. So I think this is really cool that I'm in Ecuador. You guys are in the States. I'm obviously from America. You can tell from my semi-retarded California accent. But we've all come upon this carnivore diet thing, and it seems like it's affected all of us. So I wanted to ask, first of all, Father Deacon Ananias, how did you come upon a carnivore diet, and what got you interested in this?
So my wife was, she became permanently disabled from a spinal cord injury and developed a lot of problems. We had surgeries. And this happened probably 11 years ago, 12 years ago, about the time that we got married. She developed epilepsy and fibromyalgia, occipital neuralgia, and we had surgeries to fix that. And we put all our faith in the modern medical community. And what the modern medical project is not, as became obvious to us later, not to heal, but to treat the symptoms, to prescribe medications. And you don't know about these things. And so you're just told your whole life to trust the doctors. They know what they're doing. And it almost killed her. The polypharmacy that they prescribe, the types of medications and narcotics, and now you're feeling depressed, we'll take this SSRI. Well, now you have this problem, then take this stimulant. You can't sleep, take this. And it wasn't working. Our lives were falling apart. And we started, interestingly enough, at an Orthodox conference, ran into a nutritionist. Now, the nutritionist was a vegan, plant-based diet. And so I gave my faith. You're just so desperate, you give your faith to anything. And we tried that. And I'm telling you, for about the first 3 weeks, we felt great.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's due to the fact that you're going off the American standard diet. You're getting a lot of the crud out. But can you sustain yourself on a purely plant-based diet? And we plateaued within 3 weeks and started feeling bad again. Yeah. And we began to, my wife did a lot of research. We kind of went, and this is a common story that you hear from people, that we went into the keto.
Yep.
And the first thing that I did was, and I had some problems too with my insulin levels being spiked and going up and down ever since I was a junior in high school. By 11 o'clock, I'm exhausted in the morning, have to take a 2-hour nap, drink lots of coffee, and then can't sleep at night, and it's just going up and down. I remember my mother saying, "There's something wrong with you." And I said, "Is there?" I asked other people, "Are you tired every day, all the time?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "See, Mom, nothing's wrong with me. Everybody's feeling like now, obviously, my standard of normalcy, I don't know if that was a great standard. But as soon as I cut out sugar and carbohydrates, I immediately started dropping weight. I went from 188 to 150, 148. Now I had to learn to put, my calorie intake and because I dropped too low. But I had tons of energy. I could think straight. I was clear. I slept better. And you just don't know that you've been living what that feels like when you're living in that day to day with, carbohydrates and sugars, what that's actually doing to you. And that really was the impetus that, we've got to keep researching this. And we eventually, through our research, went into the carnivore diet. And this has healed my wife. So when people are in doubt that I don't know about this, there's so much information out there, who do we trust? Just keep this in mind that we were able to do what nobody in the modern medical community has been able to do. And so I think that's testimony in itself. And we can obviously go through the science and stuff like that. But I think that's a powerful testimony that, that's how we got into the carnivore diet.
That's incredible, man. So you when you say, I mean, your wife had major nerve damage, right? Like major issues with her spine. And I'm just kind of curious. I don't want to go too deep into it because we have so many, we have really awesome topics to talk about as far as, Orthodox theology goes and, veganism and all this. But what kind of symptoms was she having and what changed? Because, I mean, it sounded like she had a major health issue and like you said, her life basically fell apart. And when you say that she healed her.
She was practicing law, working at law firms, and she had to drop out of that. We moved to Ireland to finish my PhD, and she enrolled in some graduate work in law and could never complete that. It was just, so I became her, kind of caretaker and entrusted her and her whole life to the modern medical community. And they didn't know what they were talking about. We did have a good neurosurgeon that in Ireland that was able to identify after the surgery in the United States. What they did is her spinal cord at T3, she had a herniated disc that was cutting off her spinal cord and putting pressure. So she was losing mobility. She had very, very sensitive to pain all the time, flu-like symptoms. Now we know a lot of this is due to inflammation, that certain foods will cause inflammation and exacerbate these underlying problems. And so they just, would give medicine. Now the doctor, the neurosurgeon in Ireland, he was the first doctor to actually identify what was going on. And he says, look, everything's structurally sound. They put titanium plates and cadaver bone and fused her neck together. But the pain just got worse and worse. And then they just prescribe more and more narcotic pain medications. which gets you more sensitive to, and you have to take more. It's a vicious cycle.
Oh, no, it's terrible. Yeah, people don't realize that when you take, especially opiate pain, like, I mean, when I was in high school, like I had scoliosis, so I always had back pain and sitting in desks all the time, hunched over, you know, bored in class all the time. And I remember I had this girl I worked with, and she would give me Vicodins. So I would take these Vicodin, and you know, I'd feel a little bit better. I was using them semi-recreationally, of course, it was high school. But I had pain. I need some Vicodin. So, but I would take these things, and it would kind of help. But then I found after a while, and after I stopped taking them, the pain was way worse. And I've learned recently as well that these opioids eventually they actually make you more sensitive to pain. Like long-term use of opiates make chronic pain, way worse.
Absolutely. So what this neurosurgeon was able to identify is that although structurally everything's sound and corrected, your neurological system has endured so much pain for so long that it's built in this kind of memory pain within the neurophysiology of your neurosystem. And so he tried to treat that through various electrolysis, stimulating the nerves and kind of knocking it out and stuff like that. But again, when I was a kid, doctors used to talk about health and nutrition and exercise. And it's very, very, very rare to ever hear a doctor that way. So even as good as that doctor is, it wasn't, hey kids, change your diet. That never comes up. You might get this more with the the Asian doctors because they come from a different kind of ethos and paradigm. And
they have a completely different system. It's crazy. You talk to like Eastern medicine people. They're talking about, all right, well, maybe your liver is too high, and you need to move your liver. They're like, let me move your liver down a little bit and just push your gallbladder. That's all this weird thing. We had this Russian guy that was trying to help my wife with some things not too long ago, and it was just such a different paradigm there than the Western medicine.
Yeah. So a lot of these things are coupled with the research, and we can talk later about, because I know a lot of people had questions about, well, there's just so much contradictory research, and this person's a doctor, and this person's a nutritionist, and they're all saying contradictory things.
Yeah.
How do we approach that? So we could talk about that later. But coupled with the research, plus anecdotally, I know, Tristan, that you always say, do what works for you. Yeah. None of us are here to preach what foods you should be eating. We can
hopefully nobody that's watching this has to do a carnivore diet. You know what I'm saying? It's like people want to be able to, hopefully you can eat whatever you want, don't have to think about it. But look, if your health is failing, if you've got major insulin resistance, if you're having trouble losing weight, peripheral neuropathy from type 2 diabetes, stuff like that, there's a really quick way that you could use diet to pretty much knock this out and completely eliminate it.
Absolutely. So that's our miracle and success story. And remember too that it's not just that, but living a prayerful life, Orthodox ascetics, that we're holistic beings, that we're not just physical. We have an intellect that we must treat, a heart, a body, a spirit, and that a holistic approach to healing is definitely Orthodox.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they get so caught up in hell. I know sometimes people get these health crises, and they can get so obsessed over just like physical health, right? I think that's something a lot of people miss. They're trying to get their life back in certain ways, and it's almost like the body can become an idol in certain ways. Mm-hmm. Health can become an idol, right? It's like, oh, I just have to be healthy. I have to be healthy, and it's like I know people who they say they're trying to get healthy, but they're constantly self-sabotaging themselves, like Munchausen syndrome almost. They're just really destroying their health constantly. I gotta get healthy. I'm gonna go drink 20 cloves of garlic. It's just kind of like a self-sabotage thing.
The cleanses are a big fad too.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, this is a really good segue. Thanks so much for sharing, man. It would be really cool to talk about, maybe to even talk with your wife one day and hear her story from her, because that's incredible, man. She was bedridden, right? Like her life was miserable.
I just accepted that, at the beginning there's hope. Well, God, you're going to do things according to the way I dictate. And of course, you're going to heal it. And that's my faith. I have faith, but that's not really what faith means. And eventually, I kind of, after coming out of the despair, and really all of this, I mean, we lost everything. That this is exactly the sort of suffering that was needed to humble me to be able to come into Orthodoxy. This was our path to conversion. And nobody can come to Orthodoxy without a certain level of humility. And so glory to God for all things. That at the time I didn't see the wisdom in allowing this evil and suffering. And that's truly, St. Luke, the surgeon, speaking of health, of Crimea, said suffering, the unique place, the only place where evil and good come together. And truly, that I thank God for that. And look at all the great things that have happened from. And by the way, I just decided I met my parents to get better reception. But I brought my patron saint of our home, which, if anybody recognizes, this is Saint Pantaleimon, the physician who converted in the 4th century. And became a martyr eventually, but he was a doctor, and once he converted to Orthodoxy, he dedicated his whole life to free healthcare on his own. He's called an unmercenary, so he'd heal people for free. That was his. And so because both my wife and I being healed, we have this both as the patron saint of my car and the home. So I thought that would be apt to have that behind us here.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, man. Yeah, that's so cool. Let's jump over here to Jay now. Jay, wake up, Jay. Are you asleep? There he is.
No, I'm not asleep at all.
What's up, Jay? I saw you disappeared for a second there.
Well, I had to disappear because I was blowing my nose. I didn't want my Osho booger whistles to start whistling and chiming.
The stream is not complete without some Osho booger whistles, Jay.
Booger whistles.
Yeah.
Jay, how did you come upon Carnivore? Just to kind of give the audience a little idea of where you're coming from. How did you come upon this?
I first heard of it a year ago from Jordan Peterson whenever he went on Joe Rogan. I think I had met you, but I didn't really put a whole lot together with 2 and 2 with what keto carnivore was. I just heard in the background Jordan Peterson talking about it, and I didn't think much about it. And then I heard Michaela Peterson on with Jordan Peterson talking about it, and I thought, her symptoms kind of sound like gut issues that I've had. And then you and I did a couple of live streams, and I started listening to you regularly, and I thought, wow, he's talking about a lot of stuff that she was talking about, a lot of similarities, people having gut issues. And you had done several streams that I just happened to catch about a year ago, 11 months ago, 10 months ago. And the more I listened, the more I thought, I've tried all these other approaches to gut issues, and I don't know whether mine were from a lot of drinking in my 20s or just the crap American diet I grew up with, or a combination of those things, GMOs and all that as you're growing up. But eventually started having these kinds of gut issues. And actually, of all people, when I hung out with Roosh, he actually said he had a similar issue with when he had gone to Latin or South America, I don't remember where, but he had some kind of gut issues, and the doctors told him that if you get some kind of like irritable bowel, it can eventually mess up the lining of your intestines. I'm guessing that's what it is. So if you get some like E. coli, I don't know if it's E. coli, but some kinds of illnesses can somehow mess up the gut lining.
For sure. Like there's viruses and bacteria. I mean, viruses actually live in our gut, and there can be dormant viruses that can become active under certain contexts. It's such a weird thing. Like when you look at the scientific research on this stuff, you get down to a certain level and it just becomes really just kind of fascinating and almost, I don't know. It's very mysterious. The human body is really crazy, and the gut it's like this major battleground for bacteria.
So
and viruses.
So about 3 years ago, it was getting really bad, and I got sick 5 times, like really bad, sick 5 times. Not just my gut, but I got flu twice really bad, and then I got food poisoning 2 or 3 times in that year. So I went on antibiotics like constantly that year. Like every couple months I was sick and I was on antibiotics. And then that was really messing up my gut. And I remember the kind of the breaking point where I got super duper sick was right after I was on with Clyde Lewis, and we were talking about Doctor Strange, I think. And I was happy that I'd gone on national radio, and I took like 3 shots of tequila. I was like, yeah, that was the last time I drank because it just demolished my gut. I was in so much pain, and I decided I got to do something. So I started with, this is before I knew you, I started with eating a lot of vegetables, right? My thinking at the time was like what most people think. This is about 2.5, 3 years ago.
For sure, that's what we all think. More veggies, maybe even vegan.
I just got to go veggies. So, and I did that, and I started feeling a little better, but it's still, the gut wouldn't get better.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of led me after I did an elimination diet for about a year. I kept eliminating, and I'd add this, and I'd take this out, and I did a food diary. I did all that stuff for months and months and months. And I did the phase of, I'm going to take a whole bunch of supplements, right? Where you got like a giant shelf full of supplements, and every day you're like
probiotics.
You're pounding all these supplements in it. Yeah. So then finally, when I heard Michaela and then I listened to you, the symptoms they discussed were what I was having. And I thought, there's nothing to lose, right? So why not try it out? So I went on a pretty strict carnivore, and everybody who knows me can vouch for that because they've seen my weird diet whenever I'm hanging out. They're like, why don't you eat your greens? You're not eating enough leafy greens. Where's your greens? And I'm like, I haven't had greens in 11 months, and I don't miss any of the leafy.
It's funny how the greens, we think they're so necessary, and then you go without them, and you realize
and they're not.
How silly it is. It's like,
it is silly. And then
if I'm going to eat any plants or carbohydrates, it's going to be like, you don't digest greens. Like fruit, pretty easy to digest. Most people, maybe some starches, kind of easy to digest, but like the greens, it's just indigestible roughage.
So the main thing was cutting out the sugar, as Father Deacon Dr. Ananias said, and then cutting out the greens. And then after about week 3, you still crave the carbs a little bit. So I was still tasting a little bit of peanut butter here and there to satiate that craving. And then after a while, you get really used to it, and it doesn't really bother you. And really, the problem isn't carbs itself, like, as you point out many times, because I'll have a little bit of organic goat milk. My gut does okay with that. I have a little bit of honey here in my coffee here and there. Yeah. So it's not that you have to be some kind of cult crazy person of like,
right, like you can never have a banana again. If you look at a banana and think about eating it, then you fail, and you're kicked out of the carnivore club. No, that's the.
But I'll tell you what, I haven't had. I have had no cake. I've had no cookies. I've had none of the stuff that would have been a normal part of my daily routine of, I gotta have dessert right now. It's time for the piece of cake after I had my veggies or whatever. All that's gone. The whole system is reoriented. And as most people can see, if you look at live streams and videos and shows I did 2-3 years ago, you can tell I had about 30 or 40 more pounds on me. And so I weighed myself from where I was, 3 years ago. I was about 210, 215 3 years ago. And now I'm at 175, 180.
Wow. That's amazing. That's awesome, man.
And the gut issues are more or less gone. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Love it. So there are a lot of people that have questions about, all right, so Orthodoxy, right? Jay Dyer, got to thank you for introducing me to Orthodoxy. I got red pilled as a young man, then I got black pilled. Really, I was snorting black pills for years, and then that leads to the God pill, right? So I got God pilled, kind of in more of a Protestant way. Didn't really, read the Bible, and my heart was open, right? I was actually baptized by a Protestant. But then came upon Orthodoxy, thanks to Jay. So, thank God I was, our family's been so blessed by being able to read the Church Fathers, the Orthodox Study Bible, and a lot of the reading recommendation that Jay has given through Father Seraphim Rose, the Nihilism book by Father Seraphim Rose, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, which I've shared with several of my friends. I make all my friends read that book. I make all my friends read the Nihilism book. And so this has opened up my eyes in many ways. It's opened up my eyes to historical narratives that we have not been told, that have not been shared with us. It opened up my eyes to the history of the church, the true history of the true church. So carnivore diet and orthodoxy. There are a lot of people, and this can become a stumbling block for many. And when I was first introduced to orthodoxy, and I saw the fasting rules, I was like, "Whoa! Like I'm gonna die if I fast like the whole month." and I've like, there's nothing I can eat. Like I'm trying to think. I'm like, look, I'll do it. But what can I eat that I can digest? That's not an animal food. There's very few foods that I can digest. So this is something for me that came up in the very beginning when I started studying Orthodoxy. And like the stubbornness in me was kind of battling with this idea. It's like, oh, like how can I do this? This sounds so torturous, the fasting. But yeah, I'd like to jump over to I guess Father Deacon Ananias, because you're a deacon. Which, if you want to explain to the audience what a deacon is.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different than obviously. Well, it's a lot different than Protestant notion of a deacon, but even different than their own Catholic idea of a deacon. So within Orthodoxy, there's a 3-level sacerdotal order, the priesthood. And so all of which are called clergy. The bottom level is called deacon, from the Greek diakon. And they're a priest. So this is why you get the Reverend or the Father Deacon Ananias is the full title. You won't have that within Roman Catholicism. You certainly don't have that in Protestantism. Now, as we'd call a full priest, the next level, the next tier of the sacerdotal order is called the Presbyter. And within that, there's different rankings. Presbyter, Proto-Presbyter, Archpresbyter, Archpriest. And the highest level, so and each of them have certain duties. So there's certain things that I can't do, and only the presbyter can do. Consecrate the holy gifts, the Eucharist, and various other sacraments. And then the highest level of the sacerdotal order of the priesthood is episcopos, the overseer, the bishop. And within that, you have different rankings too. So I am your lowly servant, Father Deacon Ananias. So it is the priesthood. So it's Father Deacon or the Reverend Deacon. And so basically, I'm the servant of all. Deacons do the majority of the liturgy. Is the presbyter priest does the prayers within the altar. It's the deacon's job to make sure that everything is tidy. All the acolytes are where they're supposed to be. All the candles are straight and lit. Everything's clean. And then they do the majority of the movements, prayers, and litanies. And they're leading the people. So they tend to come outside of the altar. And they face the altar. And then they lead the people. They're taking their prayers up to the altar and giving it to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So that's primarily the deacon's job. Historically, the deacon's job was also sent to be taught by the priest or the bishop to teach apologetics as well. So this is a tradition we're continuing here. So in a nutshell, that's nice. The Orthodox notion of deacon.
You weren't raised Orthodox, were you? You mentioned earlier that you converted.
Yes, I converted. So I'm a American Norwegian family born in Minnesota, drinking pop and so, as you know, everybody in Minnesota is pretty much Lutheran. So my family background is Lutheran. And then, like perhaps you'd mentioned as well, went into kind of an evangelical, non-denominational. I went to school at Calvary Chapel, Chuck Smith's church, the famous, tied into Greg Laurie. Went to school with Greg Laurie's son, the Harvest Crusade man, and didn't like that at all. Moved away from that and went back into my Lutheran roots. And then for many years, and my wife was Lutheran with us as well. But I had a deep desire for higher liturgy. And when I was in Ireland, I started attending, it's called the Church of Ireland, but it's the Church of England in Ireland. Church of England in America is called the Episcopal Church. And I appreciated their liturgy, but I wanted to keep so I'm mixing and matching this buffet, like, well, I'm an Anglo-Lutheran, and I'm like, this is just ridiculous. This can't be. I don't want to have to figure all this out and have people's salvation dependent on me creating my own systematic theology. And again, through the grace of God, studying the Orthodox Church for 14 years. But like I said, studying is just not going to do it. That coupled with God allowing me to suffer enough to acquire a level of humility and a profound miracle that happened when I came back from Ireland, when I finished my PhD, went to a liturgy. That miracle in the liturgy sealed the deal. And both my wife and I converted.
Well, and so to become a deacon, like from being converted to Orthodox and catechumen, and then going to become a deacon, how long did that take? What was that process like?
Oh, that was faster than normal. It was really strange. I was baptized in the Antiochian church, and then through another miracle, which is really strange, ended up going to a Romanian Orthodox church, where I was the only American there. They're all speaking Romanian. And I became, the priest took me under his wings and began to start training me serving and stuff like that. And one day said, I have a proposal. I want to send you to seminary to be ordained. And I said, that's the craziest thing I'm not doing that. That's not going to happen. And you go pray about it and come back. And 2 or 3 months later, he says, I was thinking, if God wants you to become a priest, is there anything you and I have to say about it? And it just clicked that my whole life, I had been living my life according to what I thought was right, and career bound. Oh, I've got to make this philosopher. I got to be this philosopher, and we all buy into identity politics at various levels. But brothers and sisters, the only identity that we have is in Christ Jesus. That's our true identity. All this other stuff's nonsense. I'm not a philosophy professor. I'm a servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. And that just clicked when my priest said that. And I realized I'm tired of living my life according to my will, and I want to become a servant of all of humanity and the church. And then off to seminary.
Wow.
To become that.
So I know I kind of started with this because the fasting stuff was something that was, I think a lot of people are interested. It keeps coming up in the chat too. People keep throwing the question out about fasting. So Orthodox fasting, there's certain way that Orthodox does fasting. It's funny because in Orthodoxy, fasting is essentially no animal foods, right?
Correct.
If you're a vegan, an ideological vegan, your whole life is based around that. Like your whole identity is based around no animal foods, right? So yeah, I'd like to kind of ask you, how do you deal with fasting? You're doing a carnivorous diet for medical reasons, partially for medical reasons, at least for yourself, right? Like you had major insulin resistance. You found that a carnivore diet helped you in many, many ways. Your wife had an incredible, reversal of her health, reversal of major infirmities using diet as a tool. So how would you and your wife go about doing the Orthodox fasting when you have this dietary pathway that you've been doing for so long? How does that work?
So it's so easy for us people to fall into a sort of pharisaical legalism, that the law and rules for the law and rules' sake, and that this kind of dogmatism. But we're using these rules, whether it be fasting or the various canons, to achieve a certain end. So therefore, they're means to a certain end. And so when people say, you have to do this, there is no have to in the Orthodox Church. There are rules and guidelines in which are very pragmatic. If you do these, they help. But you're not the individual who decides what you need. We're the worst judge of oftentimes our physical, but mostly our spiritual character of who we are. And this is why it's so important in the Orthodox Church to have a spiritual father confessor that you confess to. And so You put your life in their hands. They're like a trainer, because you can imagine if you were working out and I don't need a trainer. You're not going to develop correctly. You're not going to see yourself correctly. And there's an analogy to be carried over with a spiritual trainer as well. And so when it comes to these issues, whether it be the canons or the rules of fasting themselves, they're a guide, a marker to what you achieve. And what you do is you go to your father confessor and you bring up these issues, because there's always freedom in the Orthodox Church. And you say, Father, I have these medical issues that if I fasted in this way, if I abstained from certain foods during the fast in a certain way, it would jeopardize my health. I've never, ever heard of a priest say, I'm sorry, the law's the law, and you got to do it. Every priest has been accommodating, and they'll have you fast in other ways. So, for example, they might prescribe, I want you to cut out dairy. I want you to, my priest has even done this for me. Well, try during this fast to cut out the red meats. As much as I love red meat, and it's the most nutrient dense, it's not going to kill me to eat chicken during the fast, or fish, shellfish, so that it doesn't jeopardize my health. So I always recommend, first of all, don't listen to laity. They're crazy. And laity on the internet are doubly crazy. It's just a domain for demons. Messages.
By the way, can I make a point?
Yeah.
Speaking of that, it reminds me of when I was about 3 months into Carnivore. There was an Orthodox layman in the chat who kept coming on and saying that you're lost. You're not Orthodox because you're not keeping the fast. Even though I explained all the stuff that you just said, this guy who was just a lay guy, just some dude. So you're not Orthodox.
What is it with people that, like, everybody's looking to accuse everyone, like looking for some way
right.
to, oh, you're bad, you're
to
the
one
bad
up.
man,
It's a spiritual one upping. Gotcha, I one upped you.
Gotcha.
That's sad.
Yeah. So number one recommendation, always with anything, go to your spiritual father. Don't go to laymen and people on the internet. They're crazy and they don't know what they're talking about. They need help just as much as any of us. And so we don't seek guidance from them. They're not going to put together, it's not going to be laymen that put together an ecumenical council on fasting. They don't have the authority or the spiritual discipline and maturity to do that. So we entrust our lives to our spiritual fathers. We talk to them. And the other thing is, it's pharisaical. There's a reason why we're abstaining from certain foods. Fasting is known as a discipline. And it's a discipline in order to tame the will, self-will, and pride. I want what I want, when I want it. And this is necessary in the Orthodox life. This spiritual discipline, which the fathers say, is taking control of the passions. And when we do that, we begin to experience joys and advancements within the spiritual life. And so people get hung up on, they think the fasting is an end in itself. It's a means. And they also forget that the fasting, i.e. the abstaining from foods, is never by itself. It doesn't exist by itself. That there's a whole host of spiritual exercises that you're supposed to do. That you're supposed, as Scripture says, it's not what goes in a man's mouth that defiles him, what goes out. We speak less. Again, this is an attempt to master our passions, a sort of discipline. We're supposed to alms give, out more TV and internet, that all the things that we desire, we are attempting to engage in a discipline with the help of our community, i.e. the church and our spiritual father. that we all do together so we can support each other to help us gain control of our passions. And we must always, people focus, they think the only part about fasting is just the food. They're hyper-focused on the food, and that's wrong. That's not a correct way to view it.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
I mean, Tristan, I don't want to, yap over
Oh, dude,
you.
I'm not trying to,
your
like,
stream.
No,
I just
take it
one
wherever you
thing
want
that
to
I
take it.
think, because we have a lot of people that would listen that might be new or they're not familiar with kind of the context. And I remember when I was Roman Catholic looking into Orthodoxy, when I would hear people talk about the passions, I was confused. I mean, because modern Western people think, oh, passion, you're talking about like you have a passion for playing guitar, you have a passion for your Bill Cosby impressions, which I do, but that's not really what passions mean in the theological context of the fall and disordered passions. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so again, first things first, words are equivocal. They have multiple meanings. And what we mean by passions is not being, i.e., passionate about something that guys were just supposed to be stoic all the time and just, never experience any types of it's not emotions. What passions are typically identified with base desires in an inversion where your desires, typically associated with your senses, are now ruling your will. So as Paul says, the things that I will to do, I do not do. And which I will not to do, that's the thing that I do. He's speaking about the passions, that your bodily desires are ruling your will. And the fathers speak of this. It goes all the way back to Plato too. Too much freedom is slavery. Do what thou wilt is a trap of the modern world, and it will lead you into becoming a slave to your all your sensual desires, and you will become less human. You will not become a human par excellence, but you will become a slave and a degenerate. So that's what we mean by passions.
So are the passions? I think it's an interesting concept. So like the passions aren't inherently bad, right? Like in and of themselves, these. So you have hunger, right? Like so we get hungry because if we don't eat, we're gonna die, right? We have to eat. If we don't eat and at all, we'll wither away. Or we have sexual desire, which can create families and bring new life, but they can be like played on, right? I mean, what are the passions in and of themselves bad?
Great point. Great question. That's an excellent point. So in and of themselves, they're not bad. What we're seeing here is a disorder. And Jay and I talked about this before. It's not just the passion, your physical senses. It's also the intellect. That there's a hierarchical order established in the creation of man with Adam and Eve. That the deepest, most inner region of man, which in Orthodoxy we call the Nous, retranslated from intellect to be something like the eyes of the heart. That is the place where you speak to God, they connect to God. And that informs, and this is where love is, by the way, that informs the intellect and the will and the physical senses. So what happens when we sin, when we break that, we make a disorder, we invert. Now I'm an Epicurean. I let my physical senses dictate what eat, drink, do as much physical sensations as I want. That's what we mean by the passions. So physical sensation itself is not bad, but it's when and how much. All of these are important questions. And as Aristotle says, the senses are dumb. There's no intelligence in the senses. and Plato talks about this too, you let your senses rule you, you're a dummy. You're going to end up in bad things. And so God established a proper order. And this is what the Orthodox life's about. This is what the disciplines and asceticism's about. And this is what about fasting is to reorientate ourselves and put the whole of mankind back into proper order and synergy.
I think, a good analogy a lot of people make is addictions. And I think it was a Greek priest or in the Greek sphere, Father Moody, who said to me one time, he was giving a good analogy for this. And he said that, all of us really are just addicts on different degrees and addicts to different things. Even if you don't have a drinking addiction, we all have some kind of addiction to something like, oh, we like our pride being stoked. We like our ego. We like, secretly we like to, gossip about people. Those are all versions of addictions to things that are misuses of our senses or of our faculties or whatever. So in a way, every one of us is just like the guy who's addicted to heroin, right? We may not be addicted in the sense that it's as damaging to our body as the dude on meth or heroin, but sin is a disease that has affected all of us in some degree. So just a helpful analogy.
Great. That's actually a great analogy, Jay.
So speaking of like Orthodox fasting, it's really interesting how Orthodox fasting, it is essentially an all plant diet, right? So during the fasting periods, during fasting days, you're abstaining from meat and animal foods. I just think it's really interesting that in Orthodoxy, fasting is not eating at all. It's like if you were on a long-term plant-based or vegan diet, you'd be considered fasting in Orthodoxy. So I think it's very telling that fasting is not abstaining from all food; it's abstaining from animal food. So it's kind of implied there in a certain way that the animal foods are very important and essential, and that they are considered what is actually food. Am I wrong in asserting that Orthodoxy seems to? I'm not saying Orthodoxy exalts animal foods or anything like that. It's just funny in the worldview of Orthodoxy, it seems like animal foods are what are considered the most crucial and important foods and the ones that you fast from.
Right, that's a great point. By the way, we should qualify that there's different levels of fasting. When we say strict fast, and this will be because we have different fasts. The Apostles' fast, we're going in tomorrow to the Nativity fast. We have the fast of Great Lent. In different periods and different fasts, we do different types of abstaining from foods. A strict fast is to abstain from all animal products, oil, and wine. Parts of the fast, though, a moderate fast, will allow certain things like dairy. Also, on feast days during fast, oftentimes Saturday and Sunday, you're allowed fish. So when people, the monastics basically have that sort of fast. They fast from all animal products with the exceptions on certain days of fish. So it's not actually correct to say, oh, the monks are vegetarians. They're pescatarians, if you want to be strict. And the other qualification is people say, well, we're Orthodox or vegan half the year. And we'll talk about this later if you'd like to.
Yeah.
Veganism and plant-based are two separate things. Orthodox are not vegans in any sense of the, and we'll get into that. So people use these terms not knowing what they mean. And I think it's very important to qualify that even in the fast, we don't always abstain from all animal products. There's different types of fast, strict fast, moderate fast, certain days that are allowed to eat the fish, and oil and wine and different stuff like that. But to be technical, we would be primarily plant-based, i.e. Plant-based and coupled with kind of pescatarianism. So monks are pescatarians. They're not actual vegetarians.
And that's during the strict fast, as you call it, right?
So monks are basically a strict fast. You abstain from all, and then on certain days on the calendar, it'll show like feast days. you'll be typically like Saturday or Sunday, you'll be allowed to eat fish. But strict fast would mean all animal products, oil, wine, eggs, dairy. Then moderate fast will allow some of those things. It gets complicated. I'm not going to get too far into the details. I just wanted to make the point that there are distinctions. It's wrong to say that Orthodox are vegans half the year. It's more proper to say they abstain from most animal products, and they're plant-based with pescatarian within that. And that monks are not vegetarians, nor are they vegans. They're pescatarians all the time. So they keep the fast, the strict fast, all the time, but on certain days allow, especially feast days, to eat fish. So that's an important, people get this mixed up, and it's important to make those qualifications and distinctions.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people who adhere to a vegan diet, they will say, "Oh, I'm a vegan." A lot of people do a plant-based diet. They say, "Oh, I'm plant-based." You mentioned the importance of defining these things. Now, veganism is an ethical position, right? Veganism is an ideological, ethical position that the adherents to veganism abstain from all animal foods. They don't want to use any animal products, and they do this as as kind of a almost religious practice of an attempt to try to liberate all the animals, to liberate all the animal kingdom, to stop death and destruction and animal suffering. And they talk about improving, reducing suffering and stopping the suffering of what they call sentient beings. So veganism is a moral ethical code. It's a moral ethical position. It is a religion in many ways. And veganism and vegetarianism are actually used in many Eastern religions. So I mean, this is a major part of a lot of the New Age cults out there. You see like Osho's cult. He made everyone go vegetarian, right? Sadhguru, who we talked about a couple streams back, this Indian degenerate who wants everyone to sterilize themselves, also tells people they need to go vegan, right? So there's this major tie between veganism and mysticism, Eastern mysticism, some Buddhism sects, as well as Hinduism. So I'd really like to get into the kind of philosophical and theological underpinnings and the differences between veganism and orthodoxy, and the ways in which orthodoxy and the church fathers have actually set orthodoxy apart from these heretical sects and cults and heterodox positions and vegan heresies. Right. So this is what I thought was so interesting about orthodoxy. There are a lot of these different sectarian so-called Christian groups. You've got Seventh-day Adventism, right? The Seventh-day Adventists are a major part of nutritional, the epidemiology studies that have been done over the years have been sponsored by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The Seventh-day Adventists, they come from the Millerites, right? So they come from this false prophet, this lineage of all these false prophets who are coming up with these doomsday cults. And Ellen G. White was a channeler, and she was surrounded by a bunch of Freemasons, and she actually was from a lineage of Freemasons. And so Seventh-day Adventism is one of the major pushers of veganism and vegetarianism these days. Have you looked, Father Deacon Ananias, have you looked, I'm sure you have you looked much into the Seventh-day Adventist Church and kind of their workings in the West?
No, I stay away from them.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting just how much money and energy gets pushed in through Seventh-day Adventists to push the idea of veganism as an ethical, moral, and health position. Yeah,
that's it's interesting. By the way, I just want to make a qualification that, in case anybody misunderstood me earlier, Orthodoxy and myself as clergy, I'm not saying stay offline. I'm saying, when I made a qualification earlier, that don't go for spiritual advice and advice about, especially orthodoxy, to laymen, specifically online. So I'm not telling, just to make that clear, nobody get me wrong on that. Now, you can, as part of your fast, limit online. But again, I just recommend that everybody don't make these decisions by yourself. Go talk to your spiritual father about this. Father, give me something. Should I decrease? Should I go offline during this period? But I just wanted to clarify, because I saw some people we're getting confused about that.
Cool. Thanks. So let's get into the Jay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, well, I wanted to comment on the theology part of it, because it came up back when I was Protestant, and we would have some of these kind of debates. And I remember it stuck out to me, first of all, because Paul says in 1 Timothy 4, he says that the Spirit expressly says that during the latter times there will be some that depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and the doctrines of demons. They will speak lies and hypocrisy, and they'll have their conscience seared with iron. They will forbid people to marry. They will command you to abstain from meats which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving among them which know and believe the truth. For every creation of God is good, and nothing should be refused if it is received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. Now, the context, of course, is that in the ancient world, if you read the book of Acts, you know there's a lot of controversy over when the church transitioned from being largely Jewish to a largely Gentile church. So there was a lot of debates over how do we deal with Jewish dietary restrictions. And if you recall, there's the famous confrontation between St. Peter and St. Paul over this topic. Now, the church eventually, by Acts 15, determined that the means of receiving Gentiles into the church would be based roughly on the covenant with Noah, that there would be if God accepted people as righteous at that time, that then the giving of the Mosaic dietary restrictions were for a time period. They were for a specific period to prepare for the coming of the Messiah. So for Christianity, historic Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, we have a very clear view that we're not saying that anything is inherently evil. And we would argue that even the ancient Jewish theology itself didn't say that the animals inherently were evil. Like if you were forbidden to eat, a buzzard, it's not because a buzzard is inherently evil, because God created all things. But what's key to see here is that this theology is immediately set against a lot of other animistic and pagan theologies. Because what they would do is deify, or a form of pantheism, they would deify the created world. So they would actually think that certain animals have an animal spirit. They would believe in transmigration of souls or reincarnation. Yes. So if your uncle Bobby died, Bobby is now in perhaps the body of that cow, right? So you can't,
or the cow could eventually become a person if it just tries hard enough.
If it just waited, exactly. Now, it's no accident that this is the predominant worldview of most ancient pagan religions. They believed in reincarnations. Not all of them were obviously vegan, but it is interesting that certain religions were, like the Brahmanic tradition, the Hindu tradition. They do have very strict rules and weird kind of superstitions about that. And so Paul is actually anticipating these kinds of movements. And in fact, 1 to 2 generations after Paul, you actually have false teachers doing the very thing that Paul says. So in another letter to Timothy, he mentions the Gnostics. And so the Gnostics would do this. They would forbid marriage. They would forbid all these things. So real quick, I wanted to read not too long after Paul, right around 200, you have the quote from Saint Hippolytus of Rome. And Saint Hippolytus wrote a treatise called Refutation of All Heresies.
Yeah.
So early on in this first book, he mentions in chapter 21 the Brahmins. He's talking about Hinduism, and he says that the Indians have a sect where they have these guys who sit around and they meditate, and they believe that all reality is all one, and basically you're just regurgitating. And so if there's reincarnation, then you don't want to eat meat. And he specifically says we reject that because of the theological implications. One other point I want to make too is that if you look at the Old Testament, the Genesis account, the Torah are very key here, because what happens is that you have groups that will spring up that have a specific theological agenda to reject the God of the Old Testament. And they do this because they think the God of the Old Testament is a mean God set against the hippie Jesus God of the New Testament. And this will become eventually Marcionism. But there's groups that Marcionism comes out of, and they were called the Incretites and the Tatianists. And unfortunately, one of these guys, Tatian, was actually a student of St. Justin Martyr. But Tatian went off to start his own thing, and that became Marcionism. And they basically said that, well, look, if all things are created good, then the God who says that you can eat animals has to therefore be the bad God. And so they were pretty consistent with their presuppositions of sort of New Age veganism at that time. And they said, well, then we just reject the Old Testament God. Now, ultimately, it's not consistent with the New Testament because Jesus affirms that it's the same God of the Old Testament that sent him. That's the same Father, right? He is the God of the Old Testament. But regardless, in their minds, that's what they thought. But what this shows is a consistent rejection of the theological underpinnings of the vegan ethical argument and the religious vegan ethical argument from the beginning, from the days of St. Paul all the way back to the Old Testament period. In fact, many scholars argue that in the Exodus account, when Moses is doing his miracles against the theology of Egypt, or when God is actually laying out the temple ceremonies, part of the reason for that, not every reason, but part of the reason is that it's actually an apologetic argument against the pagan religions that would deify animal spirits and animal worship, right? I mean, if you believe that the dog god or Anubis or one of these entities has power over, your life, what better apologetic than the offering of animals, right? I mean, you're not sacrificing dogs, but the offering of the cattle in the worship to Jehovah, to the real God, right? So it had an apologetic effect in the Old Testament, and you also ate it as the communal covenantal meal. That was part of the Old Testament sacramental sacrificial service, was that it was a communal meal with God. So in conclusion, if you fast forward all the way up through what are called heresiologies, there's a lot of lists of these amongst church fathers in different centuries, you'll come to the heresiology of St. John Damascus, and he will mention the Incretites, who were a division of the Tatianists or the Marcionites eventually, who forbade marriage and they forbade the eating of meats, just like the Brahmin tradition. So we have a very consistent presentation all the way up. And one last point is that even in St. John Damascus's exposition, he has a really good treatment of Genesis and the fact that God actually created certain species because he knew that man would fall. Now, it doesn't mean that God intended man to fall, but he knew that man would fall. And so some of the species were actually created with the long-term intention of them being food, St. John Damascus says. So from the outset, the Genesis account, the teaching of the Torah, the fact that we reject Marcionism, the unity of the Old and New Testaments, the fact that Jesus affirms the same God of the Old Testament, teachings of Paul and the church fathers really lay out, I think, what's the theological reasons for why we would reject the almost deification of animals is really what this does. That ultimately what this false philosophy does is that it places humans and animals on the same plane of existence, and they're not. Humans have we are made in the image of God, animals are not. And that's very important in theology. And so what happens in the whole vegan ideology, although it may have people that mean well, what it actually does is that it makes man into a beast, or on the same level of beast, and actually for many vegans, humans are worse than beasts.
Yeah, yes, exactly. The worst of the animals, right? All these other beasts and all of nature that's all natural. But then, as soon as human beings are involved with it, then you're making it unnatural, right? There's this kind of weird, without taking account of the fall, it's like they're trying to, they don't believe in the fall, but then they're trying to justify their twisted, completely self-contradictory worldview to somehow take into account the fall without really acknowledging it. It's really a weird thing.
You even see this in Darren Aronofsky's movie Noah, where you kind of get this climatism and man is the cancer, and that this kind of pro-veganism, where God's original plan is basically to, in his movie, Noah, to wipe man out, and nature will begin again without man, and it'll be in a perfected state. And I always recommend people to read Dumitru Staniloy's Orthodox Dogmatic Theology, The Experience of God, Volume 1. In Chapter 1 there, he has a really good treatment that man is, and this even goes back to the ancient Hellenistic and Aristotle's idea, man embraces, he's a macrocosm. He embraces all the principles of nature, the inanimate that we're made out of atoms, the vegetative, that we have cellulose, the sensitive, the animal, but he says man embraces all these principles, but rises above by the possession of mind, Nous. And Demetrius Stanley takes this point, and he says, if there was only God in nature, the world and cosmos would be utterly meaningless, because only through a dialogue, only man is made in the image of God. And in Orthodox Christian theology, man is the pinnacle of nature. And with that comes responsibility to care for nature and animals. But if man were removed, the only being who is made in the image of God, there could be no dialogue between God and the being who's made in the image of God. And without dialogue, there is no meaning. There would be no purpose. And this is what a lot of kind of radical vegans and climate change cultists are advocating, that we are the cancer, get rid of. And it's utterly Luciferian. It's a denial of God's order and plan, and a subversion of proper hierarchy. And they'll accuse us of being specious. I've heard it a million times, I know. But it's satanic to say that. And like I said, if you embrace, if you're the highest pinnacle of nature, the peak, and embrace all that, nobody's saying be reckless, torture animals, and, degrade the planet. It's by virtue of being the pinnacle of creation that you have a responsibility in stewardship of animals and the planet. So I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, but
yeah, no, it's so funny because the whole climate crisis narrative, and the humanity's so bad, we're a cancer on the earth. All these vegans and their ideology, where they want to make us just into beasts. It's so funny because they're also really into even while they're saying this and they're putting out this this narrative that human beings are bad, and if we were just gone, then everything would be great and nature would be so great, the world would flourish. Like Sadhguru says, if the insects die, the world will suffer, the world will collapse, all creation will collapse if all the insects die, but if we die, the world would flourish. A little booger whistle at the end there. So I mean, it's really a satanic philosophy at its core. But it's funny because they're also acknowledging man as the steward of nature within their own argument. They're acknowledging that if they wiped everybody out, then everything would be good. And it's obviously our responsibility to take ourselves out and let nature flourish, right? So even in their theology, they're still admitting that man is higher than the animals, that man does have the choice, man does have intellect, man does have the decision to do good or bad. And even though they deny all those concepts altogether, it's kind of hypocritical.
Oh, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that till you mentioned that. How self-refuting is it to say that we're not higher than the beast? We are beasts and animals, yet you're going to hold this beast to moral accountability?
Yeah. So if we're just beasts, why shouldn't we just rape, murder, steal, like genocide? All that stuff is justified. If you look at nature, if you look at how animals live, that's what it is. I mean, it's just satanic law. It's might makes right. It's the will to power, and that's what I mean. The modern world is so obsessed with this, the will to power ideology.
99.9% of the radical vegans and the activists, these people are moral relativists. And if you're a moral relativist, on what basis are you an ethical vegan? Ethics presupposes standards. Value judgments. You have to have some sort of standard benchmark to make value judgments. And this is predicated on a worldview which denies from the outset value judgments and absolute objective ethical standards. So it's a completely contradictory position, as are all the unbelieving positions.
Yeah. And Jay, why don't you say something about, I know you and I have talked about this before, and Tristan, you really like this, that, when somebody says, and this is to make the distinction between somebody who personally chooses to do a plant-based diet versus somebody who identifies as a vegan.
Yep.
So if you can't be a vegan, even by veganism standards, and say, oh, this is just my personal choice. Because as you rightly pointed out, it's a moral, ethical, and normative position And ethics is not, oh, this is just true for me. It's just wrong for me to eat animals and kill animals. But the rest of you, it's okay. And so this is why to be a vegan is to, and you could have different levels of condemnation, but to be a vegan is to condemn eating animal products. And this is why the Orthodox Church rejects it. You cannot, it's a moral position. And as Jay pointed out, that moral position is not in isolation, in a vacuum. It's tied to certain other anti-Christian and anti-human ideologies. This is why the church is rejecting it. It's not political. And as clergy, I don't speak on politics. I speak up when something is anti-human, anti-orthodox. And these positions are anti-human and anti-orthodox, and they are destructive, and they must be spoken against.
So the definition, let me just read the definition of veganism real quick, and then I know Jay wants to jump into. Veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. So veganism holds that animal husbandry is cruelty, exploitation, and is inherently bad, right? So it's if you're a shepherd and you're using your animals for wool to make clothing, if you're using the animals for food to feed your family, this is cruelty and exploitation, and it is bad. And just another thing to the point that you were just making. Go ahead.
Yeah, they won't eat honey either. That's
exactly.
Exploiting bees.
Yeah, so it's not about diet. We're not here saying, oh, vegans are bad because they don't eat meat. They're so lame. We're so cool because we eat meat, and vegans suck because they don't. Like, that's not a position that I hold. That veganism inherently, the movement of veganism is an ideological movement with a philosophical foundation that inherently rejects Christianity, rejects God, and goes directly against Scripture and the truth, right? So that's what the problem I have with veganism. It's not like, oh, eating plants is lame or anything like that. It's just, no, you're telling everybody that they need to give up their animal foods. You're telling everybody that they need to stop eating animal foods and stop using animals for clothing. And ultimately, if you want to be really consistent in veganism, you're going to be a transhumanist, right? The real hardcore vegans, the real consistent vegans are actually transhumanists. And if you talk to some of these vegans, they say they want to eliminate death altogether. They don't want any animals eating any other animals. And guys like Peter Singer, who's the other guy? The guy who started Humanity Plus, Pierce, David Pierce, Pearce. These guys are. Peter Singer's not fully transhumanist, but David Pierce is a transhumanist vegan and a very, very prominent figure in these movements. And so ultimately, veganism does tie in with a lot of Gnostic ideas like transhumanism.
By the way, Tristan, who else said if you eat this vegetable, apple, you will become like God?
Right.
That message before, so.
Right. Well, and you will never die. You will surely not die. But the Seventh-day Adventists, the Seventh-day Adventists want to go back to the Garden of Eden diet, and they believe that going back to the Garden of Eden diet pre-fall, where there was no death. I don't even know if they admit that, if they believe that there was no death before the fall, but they want to go back to the Edenic diet, and that is part of their very, very contradictory to Orthodoxy dogma. And the Garden of Eden diet, it's ridiculous, right? It's this like Luciferian idea that we, through our actions and through our diet, we're going to purify ourselves and we're going to become as gods. We're going to become, we're never going to die. It's crazy.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add too was that a lot of what goes on in the fallen religions is the inability to understand evil or what the principle of evil is. So this will relate to the way that we're talking about ethics. And what most of these religions do, contrary to our view, which is very unique, is that they'll attribute to evil some kind of substantial existence or being. They'll say that thing over there, this type of thing, this species of thing is itself evil. And this is true of whether it's the ancient Far Eastern religions or Zoroastrianism or even modern liberalism today will actually identify groups of people, types of people as inherently evil. And this is problematic because, first of all, it's contrary to creation. I mean, God, when he created, said everything is good. So natures in themselves are good. Everything that God made is good. What evil is for us is a misuse of the will. It's a turning of the will away from the good. So the fathers all define evil in this privative way, not as some substantial existing thing. So evil can only be a movement of the will away from the good, because the good has being. Being is good. But to move away from the good, namely God or created goods, is itself what evil is. So it doesn't have any actual existence. It doesn't have being. There's no dualism or Zoroastrianism in Orthodox theology. And that's why we would not attribute evil to any type of thing, right? I mean, it's not evil to eat an animal, as Paul just said, because if you remember in the text that I read from Paul, Paul said all things that God made are good. So the problem with those religions is that they set up types of things that are evil, and then they'll think they have a basis for ethics, at the same time as turning around and saying that ethics are completely subjective and relative, again, which almost all of the vegan activists would. And even if you get a more, say, Hindu-minded vegan or something like that, who's maybe not as lowbrow, maybe they're a little more intellectual or metaphysical or whatever. Hinduism, at the end of the day, you know this from, you've read the Father Stephen Rowe's book, Orthodoxy and Religion in the Future. Hinduism, at the end of the day, just identifies all realities ultimately sort of illusory and subjective as well. So it's not, it's not any better in the Hindu worldview either. And in fact, as you mentioned in book 1 of, or in chapter 1 of Orthodox Dogmatics by Father Staniloy, he actually treats the world religions in the same way and kind of lumps them all under the same basic propositions about God, the absolute, and the world. And you can really, this is why you can do a presuppositional critique of, excuse me, a presuppositional critique of these views, is because there's only a limited number of options that you can have on those things, right? I mean, God is the world, God is different from the world, or the world and God are two different realms, right? Created and uncreated. The world has always existed, or it came to be, right? The world is real, or it's an illusion. I mean, there's a limited number of options you have, and every one of these that you pick, oh, I believe that one and that one, it forces you to go in a certain direction with the rest of your positions, right? So if the world is God, well, I'm part of the world, then I'm God. I mean, you see how these positions.
Whoa, dude! What?
Yeah, dude, man.
What? Mind blown.
Did you see the documentary Holy Hell?
I've got it. I've got it queued up. We should do a stream.
You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. Is Osho 2.0, dude.
I love cult documentaries. They're just so funny.
You introduced me to Sadhguru. I didn't even know who Sadhguru was until you started talking about it.
He's just my Osho replacement. Just for everybody, Sadhguru is I would have Osho. He's way better. Sadhguru will not copyright strike you within 5 minutes of using 10 seconds of his footage. Osho International, they got lots of cheddar, and they will get you.
Well, just wait until you see. What's his name? I forget his original name, but eventually he goes by the title of Andreas. So Andreas is a he's totally Osho tier, and he's a ballerina. Imagine Osho as a ballerina cult leader. And the only reason I bring it up is because you see all the same issues with him. Like, he restricts everybody's diet in the cult. Can't remember if he's vegan or not. They may be vegetarian, but
it's usually vegetarian.
I think they were vegetarian. I think they were
almost always, right? It's like a prerequisite.
And eventually, he's like, "I am God."
Yeah, they always realize that eventually. And then they usually realize that they're God, and then they also realize that they need loads of wives, and that nobody else can have wives around them.
Yeah, right.
Like, wow.
Well, in the case of Andreas, he doesn't want wives, but he wants some boyfriends.
Who's the actor? Why am I blanking on his name? 7 Seconds to Mars band.
Oh yeah, Jared Leto. He's got an island.
Jared Leto.
Well, guess who produced the Holy Hell documentary? Jared Leto.
No way. He was studying. He was studying up.
Yep.
We're gonna have to do a Jared Leto cult stream. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. let's look in and see if he's promoting veganism too. Now, he's got his whole harem of women, and he's dressed up as Jesus in white robes. And he says, I have started a cult, so he's just admitting. So the next step is he's going to announce that not only is he vegan, he is God.
Yeah.
It's the same pattern as Jay pointed out.
Yeah. Father Deacon Ananias, he is vegan, long-term vegan, very, very into the animal rights stuff.
Oh, wow.
And also very, very into Satanism and hangs out with a lot of, so he's really good friends with this guy, Terry Richardson. Don't look up Terry Richardson in Google Images because he's a pornographer.
The photographer guy?
Yeah, he's a rapist pornographer. He's a disgusting. It's weird. He's all involved with like skateboarding. I grew up kind of interested in skating, skateboarding culture, California, but he takes pictures of all these little kid skateboarders and stuff, and also all the models. And he's really, really degenerate. So yeah, Jared Leto is full on vegan.
I'm just shocked. I can't believe it.
Yeah. What a surprise. It's
what
weird.
A surprise.
When I see, I don't know, I'm kind of speculating here, and but it seems like a lot of these Eastern religions and a lot of these just the various false religions, all the false religions of the world, it seems like they're always trying to they're trying to ritualistically go back to the pre-fall scenario, right? Without having a theology of the fall, they're constantly trying to go back there. So I have to flesh this out more. So with veganism, right? Veganism, a Seventh-day Adventist say you have to go back to the pre-fall diet, right? The pre-fall diet will give us eternal life and health, and it'll make everything so great. And then transhumanism, right? Transcending death. Right, death is unnatural. It is the Orthodox position. Right, death didn't occur until after the fall. There was no death before the fall. Transhumanism is trying to recreate. They openly use imagery of the garden and the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and this kind of Gnostic thing. But it's like all the religions, all these false religions, are. It's like everyone's running around with their head cut off. Had no idea, no real theology to ground their behavior in and their way of going about life, and it's like there's a million different heretical false religions out there, but they all act as if the fall happened, and they all kind of go with this assumption that there was a fall, like humans are separate from nature, even scientism, right? Oh, well, nature was so good until we got into it, and we messed up the climate, and we changed the climate. It's like they all reject the fall, but all of their actions, they all act as if they're, I guess nobody can act as if the fall didn't happen, right? Because that is a fundamental truth. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling there.
No, it's great.
Yeah,
and I think you're right that everything you're saying is that from these different religions, whether it be Buddhism, whether it be transhumanism, whether it be we're just to blend into the monad, the one, and become God, and through a loss of identity. All of these are the same temptations that are presented to Adam and Eve in the garden. And the whole purpose, and it's trying to, what does the serpent tempt Adam and Eve with? To become like God, but on your terms. Because the whole purpose, the whole plan is that because we're made in the image of God, that we are to become partakers in the divine nature, the divine energies, as much as possible. God became man so that we may become God on God's terms, not ours. And so that these are Luciferian doctrines and doctrines of demons that you can identify because it's the same pattern. You can become God. You are God. It's all illusion. Just, blend into the one, the monad. Transhumanism, alchemy, that we're going to transcend, evil matter and basically be pure spirit, it's the same temptation of the devil. And that's the fathers know this too, and that's why they identify it. I don't know, Jay, if you want to talk a little bit about that. Jay's good at this stuff.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I got distracted. My fiance wants me to ask a question. That's why I got distracted.
Okay, no, I mean, you don't have to ask.
It was talking. We were talking about the fall and the theology of the fall and how crucial it is and important it is, and how all these other religions reject it. Yet they're constantly. It's like they're constantly alluding to it without recognizing it and realizing what they're really alluding to. Right? It's like. Yeah, no, I guess that's kind of what I was saying, and then, yeah. Well,
most religions will try to reason about the world as it is now. You see this, for example, in Roman Catholicism and Thomism, what they call natural theology or natural philosophy. They'll look at the world and they'll try to reason about it, which in itself is not an erroneous action. The problem is that when they look at the world and try to reason about it, they try to do it without taking account of divine revelation. And so when we reason about the world from our fallen state, we look at it and we see things like death and life. And so if we just consider these phenomena that we're experiencing, we would be led to the conclusion that death is just as necessary as life. They're just as natural in the natural order, quote unquote, because everything that dies, microbes come and feed on it as it's decaying and dying. So it would appear to be just stamped into the natural order that death is part of that process. So you could see why a lot of people, Dawkins and Enlightenment atheists, they would reason out that, well, death is just equally or maybe even more of a principle of evident in the world as is life. And one is energy, one is the absence of energy. Like why one of them's not better than the other. It's just what is, right? So the problem with that reasoning, though, is that if we as Christians or going from Scripture, from Revelation, if we look at the world, we have a different interpretive lens. We'd have different eyes to interpret that world, and so we see this as not inherently evil, but also not the way it was intended to be. So the world as it is now is put, as Paul says in Romans 8, into a state of decay and corruption. And it's done, God allowed that, God permitted that as a period of chastisement, as a period of training man for the next life. So ultimately, it's a restorative process. And in the long run, the death of Christ, we believe, actually transforms death into a positive thing. But as it is, death as it in itself is a corruptive, corrosive, unnatural, ultimately demonic power. It's Satan who has the power of death, Paul says. So the death of Christ is what transfers the power of death, Hades, the keys of death, so to speak, back into the hands of Christ in our human nature. It's not that it's not like God accidentally lost, the keys of Hades. No, it was allowed and permitted to be for a time period. So long story short, we don't say that death is natural. Death is absolutely unnatural. And there's not a distinction between physical death. I mean, there's a distinction, but they're not totally different. Like spiritual death and physical death, they're intertwined, which is why when Adam sinned, he experienced both a physical and a spiritual severing from God. So for us, the healing of man is both physical and spiritual as well. That's why the body and the soul, and as we mentioned earlier, the Nous, they're all intended to be together. Man is a holistic being, and that's why the healing is holistic. It's never one little thing or one little law here and there. It's holistic. So we don't see death as good or as part of a natural process. And this is one of the key problems with evolutionary theory or theistic evolution. In some way, those positions ultimately make death, quote, natural. And that's very, very disastrous to our theology and redemptive scheme, because death is in no sense natural. It's purgative. It's a kind of chastisement. It's a temporary thing that God's permitted, but it's not in any sense, quote, natural. So really I think that this is why you see such a inability on the part of a lot of Christian, quote unquote, traditions that do adopt evolutionary theory. They're not equipped then to respond to a lot of philosophical challenges. And again, this happens in the history of the Western Church, where when you have theologians in the Middle Ages like Thomas Aquinas actually saying that there was death before the fall. The animals were predatory and killed one another before the fall, even though he might not have intended it. He didn't know about theistic evolution, but what he did was he allowed the possibility within the whole Latin framework of Christianity, of the church in the West, to accept the possibility of death before the fall. If you fast forward then to the release of Humani Generis, the encyclical of Pius XII, you could see why it would be a lot easier, because Aquinas is the official philosophy of the Roman Catholic Church. It's a lot easier for the Roman Catholic Church to accept theistic evolution, which is what that encyclical is about. And then you have a pretty much I mean, I'm not attributing everything in the Roman Catholic Church to Humani Generis. I'm just saying that's one example of, oh, now Genesis is not what most of the patristic period thought it was. Now we have death before the fall. That's actually condemned in the Seventh Council. The Seventh Council condemns the possibility of Adam having a merely natural death that he would have experienced had he fallen or not. So again, the one's view of the fall and God's relationship to the world and Genesis, invariably, it always conditions the rest of one's worldview, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Would you guys mind talking a little bit more about it? I know we talked about this a little bit the other night in the stream that I was doing. You guys were both in the chat. We were talking a little bit about on heresies by St. John of Damascus, and how several of we touched on this a little bit earlier as well, but several of the groups that were mentioned in St. John of Damascus on heresies were sects that forbade the eating of animal foods. And these were specific heresies named by St. John of Damascus, and I think by some of the other church fathers, which I've yet to read. But yeah, Jay or Father Deacon Ananias, do you want to touch a little bit on St. John of Damascus, on heresies, and the forbidding of animal foods in some of these heretical sects being named a heresy, and why this was named a heresy?
Yeah, Jay, why don't you take that? So it was the Encratites, the Tatanists, right, I believe.
So the first one is in the 2nd century. I mentioned that one earlier, and that's St. Hippolytus's Against All Heresies. So it was written about 200, 210. And in the first book, he has a section, it's chapter 21, where he mentions the Brahmins. So he's talking about Hinduism. So the church fathers were very aware of Far Eastern philosophy and Brahmanism. And he talks about how their reasoning was essentially because of pantheism, right? Because of reincarnation, this kind of stuff. And he mentions that again. He says, there is also a sect of the Indians composed of those who philosophize, known as the Brahmins. They spend a contented existence and abstain from both animals and all cooked foods, being satisfied with fruits, not gathering things from trees. What's that kind of vegan word that you have to wait until it falls?
Yeah.
So that's actually an ancient Brahmin thing. They subsist upon these, and they drink the water out of a river. It was like like that. What's that? The Ganges, right? But they pass their life naked, and they suffer. They affirm that the body is constituted as a covering of the soul by the deity. But they affirm that the deity is light itself. Light, not so much as what one sees, but the actual sun and fire. To them, the deity is discourse, not that which finds expression in articulate sounds, but discourse that is found in the knowledge of the secret mysteries of nature that are perceived by their sages, their wise men. This light, they say, is the actual discourse of the sages, their God. They assert that only the Brahmins know this God on account of their authority, because they rejected blah, 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 blah. Anyways, you get the he says they don't allow for women, no contact with women. You can't be married. So he's basically just outlining the Brahmin theology of his day in 200 AD, roughly 210, somewhere in there. And then, of course, if we jump ahead to St. John Damascus, he says this is so you can, by the way, there's other heresiologies. There's other church fathers that have them. It's just these are the ones, all my church fathers are in storage, but these are the ones I have on hand.
Jay,
you could go ahead.
Jay, I think the Manichaeans were also vegetarians too.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah,
I think so. I'll have to double check on that. And then what was it called? The I'm going to mispronounce it. Ikasates. Yeah, there's a whole list of.
Yeah, there's a bunch of these weirdos, right? Yeah, if I'm sure if you went to Against Heresies by Saint Irenaeus, because he lists all the Gnostic sects of his day for the first 300 pages, I'm sure you could find some vegan or vegetarian marriage forbidding groups in there. But there's over so many. I mean, he just lists hundreds and hundreds of pages of these crazy sects. But if we fast forward to about 7th century in St. John Damascus in his on heresies, if you look at page 123, this is section 46. Now, this is sad because Tatian was an early apologist who was a student of St. Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr is known as St. Justin the philosopher, a great apologist. But he had a disciple, Tatian, who came under the influence of Marcion. And it says that Marcion taught the same things as Tatian, but he added some new additions. And then it goes on to say, the following is contained in the first part of the book on Against Heresies. There was another group called the Ancratites, and the Ancratites were a branch of the Tatianists who rejected marriage, and they also declared, which they declared to be of Satan. So Satan is who introduced marriage, and they forbid the eating of all animal foods. Now, again, the reasoning here, if you understand who the Marcionites are, is that they are a group who said, Marcion said, he was an early, I think he was a bishop, but he was an early bishop who said, you know what? There's a lot of weird stuff in the Old Testament, and my easiest way to solve this is to only accept the Gospel of John and a few of Paul's epistles. He says, I reject the Synoptic Gospels and I reject the Old Testament. And so they came to the conclusion that anything that's in the Old Testament is the mean God, laying out Genesis, laying out, destroying the world through the flood, instituting the animal sacrifices with Moses, right? That's the mean God. And if that's the mean God, then it seems to fall, well, that's who gave marriage. Marriage came from the mean God, right? So that's the demiurge. That's Plato's false God who's holding us all in, Gnostic captivity to see the truth. Matrix type worldview, right? So there you have it. I mean, this is really the root of it, is a rejection of the continuity of the Old and the New Testament.
I've got marked a couple on heresies. You have the Pythagoreans. That's another one that St. John of Damascus mentioned. Yeah, so Pythagoras, I mean, he's really revered in Freemasonry. They kind of see him as, almost like one of the church fathers of the Freemasonry's gay little sect thing. But Pythagoras held the monad in providence. He also held that it was forbidden to sacrifice, that is to say, to sacrifice to the gods. He furthermore forbade the eating of animals and enjoyed abstinence from wine. He made a distinction between things from the moon on up, which he said were immortal, and those below, which were mortal. So everything above the moon is immortal. Just lots of nonsense. And then there are a few the Dostines, like others, but more so, they abstain from animal food and pass their lives in continuous fasting. Some of them also practice virginity. The Nazareans. I think you mentioned that one, right, Jay?
Not recently, but I have, yeah.
Okay, yeah, they forbid all eating of flesh, meat, and do not eat any animal foods at all. So another vegan sect. It goes on to the other beliefs.
Except for Beyond Burgers, they're allowed to eat Beyond Burgers.
Beyond Meat, yes, Beyond Meat is the sacrament of the the Nazareans. And then there's another one to the Ebionites. You mentioned the Ebionites, right, Jay? I think you brought them up. They've got a really They believed, let's see, what did they say? The eating of meat they hold in abomination. They hold water to be in the place of God. They furthermore hold, as I have said, that Christ put on man in his coming of the flesh. They bathe in water constantly, both summer and winter, reputedly for the sake of purification. Like obsessed with water. They think they're going to purify themselves with water and by not eating meat. But it's funny because all of these, you see all these same practices that get named on heresies. You see this in like all the cults that are like all the YouTube cults. Like you see it, Nature Boy, right? Like the whole Nature Boy cult. They do a lot of these same practices.
That is? Because it's the same spirits. It's the exact same spirits that inspired the ancient heretics that are inspiring the modern heretics, and that's confirmed too. Because like if you notice reading through On Heresies, or if you've read Against Heresies by Irenaeus, you'll notice all the times he talks about charismatic groups. And there were people talking in tongues and doing all the same charismatic stuff, like the Montanists and the Massalians, and people acting like Benny Hinn and acting like a bunch of lunatics, even back then. And so it's just the same thing coming back.
By the way, it's important to point out that Pythagoras was a known cult member that used a kind of geomancy and occultic practices with numbers and it's esoteric. So it's the same pattern. You're given secret knowledge as you go up the kind of levels. So this is why the Masons like Pythagoras so much. And Pythagoras was actually, because of the practices he was engaged in, he was actually kicked out of the city. And they had secret handshakes, just like the Masons. And also with Pythagoras, this is really interesting. Guess what? He was an elite. The same patterns that you see, who's pushing the climate change? That's the same narrative. A lot of the stuff's connected to the same stuff. So like Jay said, because it's the same spirit, it's deceiving people.
By the way, one of the key founders of this, as we mentioned many times, Marcion, it's worth pointing out too that I'll read you what he says about Marcion, and you'll find some other parallels that go well with New Age and feminist ideas. So Marcion was a native of Pontus and the son of a bishop. He violated a virgin, and having on that account been excommunicated from the church by his own father, he took to flight. He came to Rome, where he requested those who were ruling the church at that time to give him penance. And when he had failed to obtain it, he became stirred up against the faith and decided that there were three different principles: the good, the just, and the evil, and that the New Testament was foreign to the Old Testament and the God who spoke therein. Both he and his followers reject the resurrection of the body. They do not confer, but they do confer a kind of baptism, but only once. And even a second and third time you get baptized if you lapse into sin. They even have others baptized for catechumens who have died, and without any constraint, they permit women to confer baptism. So they had a almost quasi female priesthood in this sect. But he goes into
the sacred feminine.
Yeah, exactly. Because once again, I mean, if the Old Testament God's mean, then God creating Adam first and then creating Eve out of Adam, that's a mean thing, because it shows that there wasn't the kind of egalitarianism that the wicked spirits want. I mean, and egalitarianism isn't real anyway. It's just a subversion technique anyway.
And by the way, I like that you made that point, because within Aleister Crowley's occultic religion, he says to make all things equal. It's the same principle. So this is why Jay and I stress so much analyzing things in terms of paradigms, and not this kind of evidentialist approach of let's just all look at the data, the neutral data, and this religion and this philosophy and what this doctor has to say here. And then just from this pretended autonomy, kind of just build up foundationally a justification for our various beliefs. Jay and I are trained in a different type of apologetics, where it's not this bottom-up approach. It analyzes things in terms of paradigms. And Tristan, I found this very helpful as far as answering certain people who've come to me with questions about, well, I'm on the internet and I find all these doctors and nutritionists saying all different contradictory stuff, and I don't know who to trust. It's because they have this same Western evidentialist empirical project of, just reasoning up, and I've got to figure it all out.
Right, like somehow if you just have all the data, then the magic, your amazing perfect reason and your perfect logic is just going to find the truth in that. And then if we all just pile all the data on ourselves, we're going to figure out the truth, right? It's like these people, oh, I don't have any dogma. I'm just all about the data. Dogma's bad, right? Dogma's lame. Like I'm all about evidence. What is wrong with that approach?
So we analyze things, and by the way, they do the same in politics too. That, well, I listen to Fox News and CNN to get a fair and balanced. I listen to everybody, and it's like, well, there's your problem. You're listening to everybody. You're trained to within our mode apologetics, presuppositional apologetics, which is throughout the fathers, just like when somebody says follow the money, follow the paradigm. Everybody has a paradigm. There is no neutral evidence and common denominator that we can all just look at. Everything is theory laden. And so the best way is, and science works this way all the time. I love how people like to critique us and say, carnivore and keto junk science. Always from people who don't have a degree in science. Like I always tell people, I have a minor in science and my PhD in philosophy specialization in philosophy of science. I know how science works. And within the philosophy of science, you can't just look at facts in a neutral way. There's something called the fact-value dichotomy, that you're always looking at objective facts through value paradigm lenses. And therefore, we have to understand, and this is how science is funded, it's not objective. Who do you think funds the scientific research projects?
Well, what's crazy? A lot of the dietary research that we're looking at is funded by Seventh-day Adventists.
Yep, I know. So that, Tristan, that's a perfect example where you're able to follow the paradigm. And the paradigm will inform how they're presenting arguments, what the evidence is, and whether you can trust that. So we always take a paradigm approach. Is it a coherent paradigm? Is it skewing the data, and is it trustworthy? And I think we do the same thing in terms of relationships too. You establish a relationship of trust between people, and I suggest you do the same thing with paradigms. Look what paradigm is consistent, not contradictory, or incoherent. And so that makes it easier. So don't trust that person because they subscribe to an ideology that's anti-Orthodox and anti-Christian. So that's what Jay and I would always argue. And it makes things so much easier.
Very well said. Yeah, no, it's so important to go to that level. A lot of people don't even question this at all. A lot of people don't realize that the importance of looking at the paradigm level.
Can I ask a question, Tristan? I have a.
Of course.
Let's see. There's a relative. My fiance's relative is asking about cholesterol. I haven't got the full specific question. I'm trying to remember what something like. Okay, I remember what it was. If a person is like, let's say they're an elderly person, and they have blood pressure issues, and then they tried eating a lot of steaks and eggs, and then the doctor told them that their blood pressure is too high from the red meat.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody in that situation? Now, we know there's good and bad cholesterol, but could you comment on that?
Yeah, a lot of people get freaked out about cholesterol, but then a lot of people also get freaked out about blood pressure, right? Like the salt is bad for blood pressure, we get told. Meat's bad for your blood pressure. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence. If you look at the scientific data on what affects your blood pressure, meat, eggs, fat, protein, these are not negatively affecting blood pressure. In fact, a lot of people, when they start doing a ketogenic diet, they see a real drastic improvement in blood pressure. So stress affects blood pressure. If you're too... Some people get freaked out about salt, right? They start a ketogenic diet or something, like, oh man, I have to salt my food. My doctor told me to stay away from salt because I've got high blood pressure. If you're overweight and you got high blood pressure, a lot of that could have to do with being overweight. If you're really stressed out and you're overweight and you have high blood pressure, you start doing a ketogenic diet, you go to your doctor, they might mistake your diet for being the culprit of that. But there are a lot of other things that could be affecting this. So I would say monitor your blood pressure. See if you're doing a ketogenic diet or a more carnivore diet and your blood pressure improves. There you go. Your blood pressure is improving. If it gets worse,
could there be other factors like, I mean, I think people misunderstand the nature of this kind of a diet. Like you can't, for example, I'm going to eat a lot of eggs and a lot of steaks now, and then you're also like, pouring high doses of nasty coffee creamer into your coffee and drinking Coca-Cola and Diet Cokes also.
Right, like it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna eat a bunch of meat and eggs, but I'm also gonna have Ben and Jerry's every night. I'm also gonna have, a bowl of cereal for breakfast. Yeah, there's a lot of other factors that come into play. But as far as like meat and eggs causing high blood pressure, that's not something that's on my radar at all. In fact, a lot of people improve their blood pressure dramatically by going towards a more animal-based diet. So, if this person is like just getting into it, and their doctor is preemptively telling them, "Oh, you just started keto or something," don't do that because you've got high blood pressure. I would definitely reconsider. Get a second opinion. Maybe get a more maybe get a different doctor. Right? Sometimes a lot of doctors don't know anything about nutrition.
Right.
It's sad. Like most doctors, they know nothing about nutrition. They have like maybe they might have 3 hours of actually talking about nutrition in their entire PhD.
Could you comment
journey.
on briefly on like the good and the bad cholesterols?
Okay, so yeah, cholesterol. Well, cholesterol, I don't think there is such thing as good and bad cholesterol.
I don't think so either.
Okay, I don't know. Are there not like synthetic cholesterols or something, or I don't know.
All right, well, there's...
It's not my field.
yeah. All right, so everyone thinks cholesterol is bad. We've been told cholesterol causes heart disease. Cholesterol is something that's everywhere in your body. Like your brain's made of cholesterol. There's so much cholesterol in your body. The most cholesterol in your body is concentrated in your brain and your fat tissues, which your fat tissue is really, really important for insulating your body, for protecting you from injuries and lacerations. Fat, like we do need some fat on the body. It's not like it's just, being super lean and shredded. You get hormonal disruptions, right? Like you get down to super low body fat, you start to get your testosterone drops, people get depressed, they get anxiety, they start to feel like they're starving. Fat on your body is important. We need some of it. It doesn't mean we all need to be big and fat, but like we do need some fat on the body. And your body's really very intelligently designed, and cholesterol is a really important part of your body. Your cholesterol is actually an antioxidant. It's used in repair processes. It's used to make sex steroid hormones, which are progesterone, testosterone. These are made. You wouldn't have testosterone if you had no cholesterol, right? So then this might be part of the reason why the plant-based diet gets pushed so intensely, right? Lowering your cholesterol. Actually, when you look at longevity studies, where they study people who live over 100, centenarians, they all have high cholesterol. And so there's actually a paradox. There's this whole paradox around cholesterol because the people who live the longest have high cholesterol. If you have low cholesterol, they're finding now that it's actually predictive 10 to 15 years before diagnosis. Super low cholesterol is actually a predictive marker for future cancer. So having low cholesterol means you're more likely to die from all causes, right? All-cause mortality increases dramatically with low cholesterol, right? So I think the whole cholesterol fear-mongering thing is really, really ridiculous. If you have friends or family who are afraid of cholesterol, please tell them to look up this guy, Dave Feldman. So he's been on the show quite a few times. Dave Feldman, cholesterolcode.com. He does a lot of really good work explaining his self-experiments and experiments with other people on the cholesterol, lipid changes within different dietary contexts. And yes, some people that go on a low carbohydrate diet, their cholesterol will go up. But this is not inherently bad. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Cholesterol does not clog up your arteries and create heart disease. Every single cell in your body has cholesterol. Your body makes it every single day. And we require cholesterol. The body needs it. It's not something that's inherently bad. And it's not going to give people heart disease. As far as I'm concerned, I think people need to do a little bit more research. And Dave Feldman is a really good resource on that. And also Ivor Cummings. Cummins? Does it have a G? Cummings. Ivor Cummings. He's got a YouTube channel. Fat Emperor called himself, or calls his project. I don't think he calls himself that. He's like the Emperor has no clothes, and Fat Emperor. So yeah, Ivor Cummings and Dave Feldman. Look into those guys. They've got a lot of good information on cholesterol, and the demonization of cholesterol is really, really silly in my opinion.
Tristan, can you talk about Jay? Did you have another question? Because I had a question with regards to carnivore.
I may have to head out pretty soon because I think we want to do boiler room. I don't want to stop you guys. You guys can keep going as long as you want, but I know they want to do boiler room here in a little bit. so I may have to skip out.
Yeah,
but,
why don't you ask the remaining questions, and then after you leave, I'll ask.
No, I'm good. I don't think I have any more. I did want to promote that if you're in the Florida, Jacksonville, St. Augustine area, I will be tomorrow or Saturday. I will be at Dose Coffee Shop. That's on my Twitter. You can find it if you want to come to the book signing. I'll be signing books, and you can come chat. Jamie will be there too, so you can get some of Jamie's books. And then tomorrow night we did a really not safe for work interview with a girl from the Holy Hell cult. So Sam Tripoli,
Wow.
thank you, Sam. So that'll be out tomorrow night. Again, this is it'll be a rated R podcast, so do not listen to this with your kids. Her stories are pretty vivid about the cult leader we were mentioning earlier, the Holy Hell cult guy. So that'll be some good podcast material though. So check that out on Sam Tripoli's stream tomorrow night, and then I'll be at the book signing. And yeah, you guys all know Jay's analysis, and you can find me on YouTube. But thank you for having me, and you guys keep going if you want to.
All right, cool. Yeah, we got. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you,
really
man.
Appreciate it. I think I might join on the boiler room a little bit later if I'm able to. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on, man.
Y'all have a good night. Thanks.
Sharing. Later, Jay.
Thank you. God bless you. Yeah, Tristan. So you probably hear this concern or objection that people get worried if you go. And by the way, carnivore doesn't mean I'm eating more meat, right? But that you are now pure animal products, and people get worried about that. Oh, you're going to get scurvy. We don't know what's going to happen to you. You're going to have putrefaction in your gut, and we just don't. Who was it? Was it Natasha Richardson on Joe Rogan? That was saying all this different stuff. We just don't have long-term studies. But don't we have? We have the Aleuts and Inuits tribes around, the northern regions.
Yep. The Inuit. You also have the Maasai who lived off. You have the Maasai who lived off a lot of animal foods. They're. Aaron and Melissa from True Stream Media sent me a photograph from a book of this another tribe in Africa where the king, the sovereign in the tribe, ate nothing but meat and milk, and it was forbidden for the king in this culture to eat any plant foods at all. So there are many examples of civilizations who've focused primarily on animal foods. You have like Swiss populations who are living off of mostly dairy, having some rye that they would grow themselves. You got like the Hebrides Islands, these Scottish populations, they were living basically exclusively off of fish. I think they had some sheep on their island as well, small flocks of sheep, and would do some oats, a little bit of oats that they would grow in a very specific way, but very, very few plant foods at all. And then you've got a study from 1929 or 1930 of Stephenson and Anderson, where they were under observation for an entire year, eating nothing but meat. And they were in New York in the Bellevue Hospital, and there was nothing wrong with them as far as their health goes. They monitored, they took blood samples, they took urine samples, they were constantly monitoring all their vitals. And of course, this is 1930, so you didn't have this spectrum of like tests that you can do now. But these guys were totally fine. And Stephenson actually lived for, I think 11 years, nothing but meat. And probably in his later years, he did it more as well. And he said he never felt better. His health was never better. And there have been a lot of people who lived successfully off of just animal foods for very, very long periods of time. And this is something that has been studied at least one time in the scientific realm with Stephenson and Anderson. But yeah, it
seems to have gotten suppressed. The studies seem to have gotten suppressed.
Yeah, a lot of people don't recognize it. A lot of the plant-based folks will say, well, that's an old study. That doesn't count. That's old. That's science is obviously different now, they'll say. But yeah, I mean, you can look at the Inuit who had great health before contact with Western imported foods. They were living off of seals, and some of them living off of just caribou. You got a lot of the Plains Indians that were living off of just meat. They would follow around herds of buffalo. They would have some berries and stuff. It's not like they would abstain from all plant foods, but they were living off of mostly just meat. And I've had a lot of people who commented on my channel over the last year or so telling me about some of their relatives who were North American Indians, and they were eating just meat as well. So we think we have a lot of this. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence, and then we have also thousands of people who are living off of just meat right now. Right, you have thousands of people doing a full-on carnivore diet. Most people who do it are not doing it for fun. Most people that do it are doing it because they had serious health issues, digestive issues, and major issues with their body that forced them to try it, and they found that it worked. I mean, look at what it did for your wife.
By the way, the other thing that it cured me of, I suffered from acid reflux, and had a hiatal hernia, totally gone. And of course, the doctors never mentioned this. Change your diet. They gave me omeprazole. And they just keep prescribing these medications.
Is that proton pump inhibitor?
Yeah, there's various ones. It's a Prilosec. Prilosec is a famous brand name of.
Those actually those actually kill your stomach acid. And you can't digest food as well, and they wreck people's guts even further, right? So rather than telling people, look, if you eat meat, if you eat animal foods, that actually is going to increase your stomach acid dramatically, right? The consumption of, especially protein, right? Animal protein increases your stomach acid production dramatically. You need that stomach acid to break down the proteins, and, of course, your body can do it really effectively.
Tristan, why don't you talk a little bit about, because I know some people get caught up in this fad of drinking alkaline water, and just the differences that, because you already hit on herbivores in the animal kingdom that have a high alkaline, within their stomach, and also get carnivores that have a high acidic, and how this works. This might be helpful to.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, that's a really good, and that's a good transition, right? Talking about proton pump inhibitors and how when we have acid reflux, the doctors are going to give you an antacid. It's going to stop the production of acid. We have stomach acid that's necessary. Our body needs stomach acid. We need a very acidic environment in the stomach to break down foods, right? So our very highly acidic stomach acid, you can actually dissolve. You can dissolve like metals in your stomach acid. It's very, very powerful stuff. And if you're drinking a lot of water, especially alkaline water, or trying to alkalize yourself with meals and everything, you're going to be shutting off the production of stomach acid. So what's really interesting is a lot of ex-vegans, like we get a lot of ex-vegan clients that come to us, trying to get their health back, trying to get their gut back, trying to get their digestion back on track. A lot of them have been under-eating on animal foods. Of course, all vegans are under-eating animal foods. They're not eating animal foods at all for extended periods of time. Their body is not triggered to create that HCl. They're not making the stomach acid because their body doesn't think they need it, right? So if you're always trying to alkalize your body, right, if you try to have baking soda with the meal, you're going to neutralize that stomach acid. You're not going to be able to break down the food. You're going to have undigested food going through the gut, and that's going to create a lot of issues, inflammation, poor digestion. So the alkaline water thing, it's actually kind of a bad idea. If you look at most really good spring water, it's actually slightly acidic, right? Alkaline water is actually not something that you really should be consuming all the time, right, in my opinion. So there are some people who think it's a great idea. There's a lot of people who are marketing alkaline water machines and stuff. But I definitely advise against this. I'd say, like, as far as water goes, the best water to drink is going to be just good quality spring water. Of course, if you're drinking tap water, you're going to fluoride and chlorine are very, very detrimental to our body, right? Fluoride can calcify parts of our body. Fluoride can create fluorosis. It can ruin our gut bacteria as well. Same with chlorine, right? Bleach, people use it to sterilize things. So alkaline water, fluoride in the water, chlorine in the water, these are all major issues that can be affecting people. So I think it's important to focus on good quality water. If you can get like a filter like that can remove chlorine and fluoride, even from the shower, right? When we're showering, we soak up a lot of the stuff into our skin. Our skin is an organ. You rub some oil on your skin, you see it goes right in there. If we are constantly bathing in chlorinated, fluoridated water, that can create some health issues as well. You could smell that chlorine if it's in the showers in California, where I grew up. Just remember how chlorinated the water was. It was terrible. You could smell it, you could feel it. Stuff does have a negative effect on the body. So good water, quality water, pretty important. Alkaline water, in my opinion, it's a bad idea, right? This whole alkalize your body, it's like this purity kind of vegan idea of acid. Oh, that sounds really bad. We don't want any acid in our body. We want alkaline. Alkaline is green. Alkaline is happy, like plants. Acid bad. Acid meat. Acid fat. Ugh. Like it's a weird dichotomy, and I think it's very, very false. So if you try to alkalize your body, you're going to lose your stomach acid. You're not going to be producing enough stomach acid, and also there are parts of the body that are more alkaline. There are parts of the body that are more acidic. You're not going to change the alkalinity of your blood. The blood has your body maintains homeostasis in the blood with things like sodium, glucose, and it's very tightly regulated, the pH of the blood. You're not going to skew that by drinking alkaline water. You can make your pee more alkaline, but that doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Like, congratulations, you're peeing on a little strip, and you got it on your fingers probably, and it tells you got alkaline pee, but that doesn't mean you're healthy at all.
Yeah, excellent. And maybe tying into you could answer, because these are just questions that are brought up, and I try to address. You're so much more knowledgeable on this. That and not saying that, again, you have to go carnivore, keto, or something like that, but perhaps tying into that we have a highly acidic stomach, just like obligate carnivores in the animal kingdom. How does that relate to bioavailability within vegetables? Can we get the nutrients? Because we're always, got to eat more spinach, we got to eat more greens. Maybe that's helpful for people to kind of break down the different types of stomachs, alkaline versus acidic stomachs, and how that makes certain types of foods bioavailable.
That's a good. It's a really good one to bring up when you're debating vegans, of course, which it comes up all the time, right? There's a really big fad going on right now. The vegan diet's being pushed really heavily in media and online. So a lot of people say, "Well, look, we're obviously herbivores, man. We was monkeys, like we evolved from monkeys or whatever, bro." These people believe these nonsensical origin stories of where they came from, and they get duped into thinking, "Oh, well, we obviously we should go eat like a monkey." But when you look at how apes eat, you look at how gorilla eats, they actually have to eat their own poop. Gorillas will eat their own crap. Like they'll poop into their hand and they'll eat their own crap because they're even not able to digest all of the indigestible roughage that they're eating, right? So you look at a cow or a ruminant animal, they have multiple stomachs. They have a completely different digestive system that is designed to ferment those plants, turn them actually into fatty acids so that they can digest them. Right now, we don't have all the stomachs that a cow has. We have a much shorter intestine than all of these plant-eating animals have, and we actually look physiologically at the human body. We have a digestive system that is much more similar to full-on carnivorous animals, right? So our stomach acid being so high so that we can break down that meat, so we can break down the protein. Very, very important, right? So these are really good arguments to bring up. And when you look at the acidity levels in our stomach versus herbivores, right? They don't have the stomach acid that we have. They don't have the stomach acid to break down meats like we have. And yeah, these are really good arguments as far as, looking physiologically at what other animals eat and what we're able to eat and digest. We can't just go and eat grass. Like, we can't just go and take a bunch of grass, chew on it, and get nutrients from it, right? We can take we can maybe get some nutrients from things like, greens if they're like prepared properly, right? So things like grains. If you try and eat grains, if you try to eat raw beans, you're gonna die. If you try to eat a bunch of raw beans, you will actually die. But if you prepare them properly, some people can digest them. I don't digest them well. I remember one time eating beans that were not cooked all the way, and looking at my wife here, she's laughing. But I ate some beans that weren't cooked all the way, and I was just puking for like an entire night, and I was sick for like a week after that. So Yeah, proper preparation of certain plant foods can make them more bioavailable and edible. Whereas, I mean, really, you don't need any preparation of meat to make it
Meat.
digestible and bioavailable, right? You could sear a steak real quick. I mean, a lot of people like what's that dish called?
Sorry, I'm 10 seconds behind.
Oh, she's 10 seconds behind because she's listening to it over here in the other one.
My wife does the same thing.
No, where do you like put the raw egg yolk on the top of the
Tartare.
raw beef tartare, right? Beef tartare, right? If you say
tartare.
if you say beef tartare, everybody thinks it's cool to eat. But if you say raw ground beef, like, oh, that's disgusting. But beef tartare, carpaccio, sushi, right? You can take a fish. You cut it open, you can eat it right there. You don't have to cook it or anything, right? But with like leafy greens, I mean, go take a handful of spinach and try to make a meal out of that. Go take a bunch of raw kale from your garden and try to make a meal out of it. Most of that is indigestible. We don't have the gut bacteria that a lot of these species have to make that bioavailable to us. And we don't have the length of gut. We don't have a rumen. And we don't, regurgitate our food back into our mouth and chew it back up and then, bring it back down to the stomach. Nor do we have to eat our own poop. I guess maybe in some vegan sects that might be a thing, but yeah, we don't have any of that. And yeah, what's crazy is meat is the most easy thing to digest, right? When you look at if you get real sick or something, and a lot of people who watch this channel have gotten really sick and haven't been able to digest any other foods, and meat. Animal foods are the easiest digested foods. The first food we have when we're born is mother's milk, right? That is the easiest food for us to digest. When we weaned our son, like some of the first foods we gave him, meat, egg yolk, beef, liver. We gave him animal foods. So, the digestibility and the bioavailability of food is very, very important. So if you're going to say, look, broccoli has amino acids, well, sure, it has amino acids on paper, but can you derive those amino acids? Can you actually extract those from the food? Can you assimilate them and digest them? That's a different story. And also the balance, the amino acid ratios are very, very different. So the bioavailability of animal foods is very, very high. The nutrient density of animal foods is also very high. And there are certain compounds in plant foods that make other things not bioavailable, right? So spinach has oxalic acid, which will bind to calcium.
Anti-nutrients, yeah.
Exactly. Anti-nutrients are abundant in the plant world. Fiber is also an anti-nutrient, right? So lots of fiber. Many people cannot handle it. I think what we're dealing with today is a little bit different than 100, 200, or 2,000 years ago. But we have a very, very... It's almost like as the generations go on, we degenerate more and more. Kind of seems like to me. I don't know how that lines up with the theologically, but it seems like we get more and more messed up. We do stupider and stupider things to produce food, like spraying them with the agrochemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, and these trash our guts, right? So a lot of people can't digest almost anything else other than animal foods. And
all vegetables are all GMO, and even if you go organic, your seeds are still GMO. So our ancestors didn't have that problem in the past. So it could be very different. And I think it's important too because it relates to healing. Because you could always have a vegan say, "Well, I feel so great." Well, I don't know if that's trustworthy or not. So, I tend to just look at the general population. What do vegans look like? Do they look healthy? What do carnivores look like? And I don't know if you can speak this way, but hello? Oh, it's God. Yes, Lord. That they all look like they're dying to me. They don't look healthy. They often look 10, 20 years older than... I challenge somebody to find a carnivore that looks that way.
Yeah, well, the thing they'll say, well, it's just a new thing. And also, most people, they're carnivore, but then they start trying other foods. They realize, oh, I can digest this food, I can digest that. So not that many people have to go full carnivore. So it's there's so many arguments, but I'm sure there will be some vegans who will tell you that I'm really ugly and that, I don't know. They come up with all sorts of ways to justify. But no, man, I mean, I completely agree. As far as when you look at the vegan population, you see a lot of illness. You see a lot of physical sickness. You see a lot of mental illness as well.
Mental health.
And,
Yep.
the mental health declines. When you're nutrient deprived, it gets really bad. Like I've unfortunately seen some vegans get really, like, I've seen some vegans who are like at their deathbed, right? Like we live in a community here where, unfortunately, for a lot of the people that come here, there's a big influence of like new age spirituality and stuff, which veganism, vegetarianism ties really into this. So a lot of these people that get into all this new age stuff, they start getting into Gnosticism and thinking that they're going to eat their way to enlightenment. They're going to become vegan. They're going to stop the cycle of suffering. They're going to not eat their cousins, the cows. And I mean, I one guy in particular I'm thinking of, he got so messed up on his vegan diet. He was so far gone. This dude was rubbing shit in his hair. This guy was rubbing his own poop in his hair. His wife, he like almost died in his wife's arms. And seven times, a friend of mine like saved this dude's life, trying to get him back to health. He would go back to eating animal foods, and then he would get back to this. No, this is impure. I got to go back to the plant foods. Just kept self-harming. He weighed like 89 pounds or 90 pounds at one point. Looked just horrifically gaunt, but he was so mentally deteriorated that it was dementia. Like the place where he got from his gut issues and from the indigestibility of his foods and from starving himself, it was like it was really, really freaky, like just kind of like demonic and really sad to see. He was screaming and lashing out at everyone around him. People were trying to help him. Like there's this video clip. It was really sad. Like people are trying to help the guy, and he's screaming at everyone around him, "No, get away from me! Get away from me!" And then he starts crying to his wife, "Help me! Help me! I need to get help! I need to get help! I don't know who I am anymore! I don't know who I am! Help me!" And then she comes to help him, and he's like, "F you! F you!" And it's just switching back and forth in this like schizo mode. And this was from nutrient deficiencies and complete starvation on a vegan diet. Obviously, the dude had mental issues before, because why are you gonna go that way? And I think you and I would both agree this is a spiritual sickness that people are going through. It's not just a mental health thing. It's not like just, oh, you have a lack of this neurotransmitter, and if we give you this drug, it's going to correct it. There's a deeper issue going on. And anyways, sorry for the long-winded rant, but I've seen a lot of these people really deteriorate on vegan diets, and deterioration is ubiquitous in the vegan population. It is what happens.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're undergoing mental illness, you don't ask the mentally ill to assess themselves. Are you mentally ill? They're going to be like, well, look, we look great. We think correctly.
Right. Right, I'm detoxing. I'm detoxing all my sinful animal flesh. I've almost detoxed it all away, and I've almost reached enlightenment. Soon I'm going to ascend out of my body that weighs 90 pounds now, and that I can't control my bowels, and I have to poop 30 times a day. It's really sad, but I have seen firsthand many times just vegan self-harm. Like I see long-term vegan dieting, see long-term veganism as self-harm and as just a slow, protracted demonic suicide almost. It's really.
And you're not saying that all vegans look that way, because I guess the question is, well, how long could you sustain yourself on a lack of nutrients? That might probably differ from person to person.
Yeah. There might be people who can do it long term. I don't know. Like there's who was it? Venus Williams or something, like some tennis players, and there's some people who claim that they've been vegan long term, and they seem to be all right. They seem to be the outliers for me. I've been around vegan populations. I lived in California, where there's all kinds of experimentation with this stuff. Santa Cruz is kind of like a hot spot for veganism and for new age stuff. where I live now, hotspot for veganism. A lot of New Age people come through, all through South America. You see all these New Age people coming through. And I've seen every single vegan I knew from when I tried to do a veganish diet back in like 2009, 2010. Every single one of them I knew has gone back to eating animal foods, and they all regret doing their vegan diet long term. They all regret it. So,
and by the way, even if we grant the argument and assume that these outliers are healthy and that's doing the veganism's working, you know, we have a principle in logic and philosophy. You don't make a rule on the exception to the rule. So even if that's working for them, you don't create a general rule to then prescribe that to. And I'd argue that you wouldn't find that on a keto or carnivore, that you have, again, a huge population. They're all healthy. And those who go off, like you said, it seems like they go off their diet and they start introducing things. And so we can isolate those factors. That this is why you're having these problems. And I think that's even part of the eliminative diet, is that the same kind of principle, eliminate all the way down to meat, and then start adding on, and then you'll be able to find exactly, oh my gosh, I had inflammation to this, or some type of phlegm, or, well, you're having some type of reaction to that.
Yeah, I think, going down, I think the carnivore diet is the ultimate elimination diet. Right now, if you look at, there's this lady, Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. She's a Russian doctor. I think
she's great. Yeah. She is fabulous. I definitely recommend her. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what she does is her stage 1 of her GAPS diet, which is gut and psychology syndrome, and this has helped a lot of people, especially autistic kids. Stage 1 is essentially a carnivorous diet, and she ended up finding that a lot of people would have to stay at stage 1 of the GAPS diet, and they weren't able to reintroduce foods because their guts were so trashed. At one point, I kind of felt like I might have been in that group. I don't mess around much dietarily with trying different foods anymore. There are a couple other foods that I can digest pretty well, other than meat, which is great. I find that I can digest more plant foods than I was able to before. But it's been a huge blessing, right? The carnivore diet has been an incredible blessing in my life. Obviously, all healing comes from God. It's just not like, just eat the magic diet and you're going to feel great. But, it has alleviated a lot of ailments that I've had chronically for a long time. It's been something that's changed my life and been a huge blessing in my life. And, it's awesome getting to meet so many different people from so many different walks of life who's had the same experience, right? Who've had the same thing, and seeing so many friends and family of mine who've dealt with chronic health issues, who've benefited from this as well. And then, man, hearing about your wife's story is pretty amazing. Like I'm amazed.
I really thought that was my cross. I'm like, this is going to be, what I have to accept the rest of my life. All the doctors said the same, totally and permanently disabled. And it really is a miracle. That
she walks now? Is she walking? She's up and...
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is she working?
Yeah. No. So, part of you have to work on, and doctors said this too, that after spending 10 years in bed, isolated, even if you're physically healed, you have to learn to readjust to society and working and stuff. So physically,
I was thinking you mentioned she was a lawyer, and I was just thinking, oh man, like if she goes back to work as a lawyer, that it's so stressful, right? It's such an unhealthy lifestyle.
And the other thing too is her gut was so damaged.
Yep.
That she's very sensitive to certain foods. Whereas, I could eat something and I don't have as big a problem.
Yeah.
But what is nice about the carnivore diet, I feel that it makes your body so fine-tuned. It's like a fine-tuned car. With a fine-tuned car, any little adjustment or something that's off, you notice it.
Yeah.
Whereas you might not notice that with a beater car. Yeah. And I feel the same way. And so... when it comes to, I found out certain things that I can't eat that cause severe problems. Pasteurized dairy Not, you know, if I don't have dairy that's raw, it causes problems.
But raw milk, raw dairy is good though. Raw dairy is fine.
Yeah, raw dairy. Yeah, especially goat milk.
Nice.
I don't have any problems with raw goat milk.
Have you tried any fruits? Because some people digest fruit really easily, and not vegetables. Like I can eat bananas, right? Like I know, if I were to eat all bananas, I'd wreck my health. But if I eat banana every once in a while, fine, right? Plantains I can handle.
Fruits don't seem to be a problem. Certain vegetables, let's see, almond, like certain nuts. So I can't do. I know a lot of people go on keto and go almond flour. I react really bad to that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. A lot of oxalate.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Is the first thing I know, I'll start to get stuffed up. I can't breathe, and I break out. I break out all over. And that's my body. Obviously, it's inflammation. It's saying, don't eat this type of food. And people are so surprised. They're like, really? If you eat vegetables? I'm like, absolutely. Now, certain vegetables, I can eat, and I'm not going to have a problem. And by eating, I mean occasionally, I might have vegetables. And it's important to know that carnivore is not a religion. It's not like, you ate vegetables and you're not a carnivore anymore.
This is what's so cool about carnivore, right? It's like we're not like the vegans where it's like, oh, if you eat some plants, like you're kicked out of the club. No, we don't want everyone to have to do a carnivore diet, like, right? Like it's cool that it exists. It's cool that it's there for us. Shoot, I mean, I would have been, I don't know, if you're coming from an Epicurean standpoint where it's like you don't want to suffer, you just want a nice, comfortable life or whatever. It's like, that's not where I'm coming. I think suffering is obviously really important, and there's a spiritual utility to suffering, and we all do suffer. But yeah, I don't wish that people have to suffer so much that they're forced into doing a carnivore diet. And if people can eat other foods, it's great. I think it's important that people understand the importance of animal foods, especially now as they've politicized diet over the last couple of years, right? It's just bam, all of a sudden, diet's a major political issue, and we need to legislate this. And to me, it's very bothersome and irksome that there are people trying to ban these foods. Like our family, we're trying to be. We're trying to produce food here, right? Like our goal is we want to have a fully functioning farm where we're producing most of our own food. Eventually we'll be there. It'll take years, right? But that's the goal, right? And there are people that want to make that illegal. There are people that are harassing and terrorizing farmers all over Australia, the UK. They're breaking into their homes. They're breaking onto their private property and telling them, you have to stop doing this. And it's like, to me, that's why we push against this. I'm not pushing against veganism because I think plants are terrible or like you're all lame because you eat plants. No, it's cool. If you want to eat plants, eat plants. If you want to eat a plant-based diet, go ahead, do it. Please don't tell everybody that they should force their children on it. Please don't tell everybody. Don't go forcing this on everybody else and making this into a crusade to end all suffering in this crazy way. That's the problem with it, right? And I think it's great that in the carnivore world, of course there's some crazies who make everyone look stupid, and no matter what group you have on the internet, no matter what niche you're in, there's going to be some crazy people that'll discredit you. They'll say your talking points, but then act like a buffoon. So there are nutcases and everything. There are zealots everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here, what we do. We're not here to, zealously push carnivore on everybody. We're here to tell you that this is an option. If you have major health issues, nerve damage, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, if you have brain damage, if you have chronic pain, chronic digestive issues, diabetes, there is a way that you can manage this and completely remit it and remove it from your life using diet. And it's not that hard, and it's not... For some people, it's enjoyable, right? I mean, I enjoy my meals. Like, it's not, I don't look at food as entertainment anymore. Food is purely utility, right? It's like if I'm filling up gas, if I'm putting gas in the car, it's not like I'm trying to give my car the best tasting gas. I'm putting it in there so it can run, right? And I'm going to put if I can afford it, I'm going to put high octane gas. And you don't eat
it through the whole day either.
Exactly. You could fast for long periods of time when you're on carnivore or keto and not have any itching for food. Like, it's really easy to do.
You can develop a window of eating where you eat a lot, and And that's kind of a good discipline in itself, spiritually, that I'm not living to eat, but eating to live. And so I've gaining control of my passions, where I'm just not going to eat through it the whole day. I'm eating so that I can get, maximum calorie count within this window and get as much nutrients to help me live a better life.
Exactly. You're filling up the tank. Like, here's fuel. Let's fuel the fuel the body, fuel the vehicle, and then move on. It's not like every day is like, oh, how am I going to prepare my food, and how can I enjoy this so much? I'm going to make this meal the best meal ever. I don't think of that. It's like, oh, I got to eat so I don't, get tired later on and get grumpy, right? Like, I got to eat so that I don't wither away and get underweight and lose too much weight, right? Because I've had times in the past where I got underweight, right? I was trying to do a vegan, vegetarian style diet. I was chronically underweight. I lost a lot of muscle. I've got chronic injuries and, joint pains and stuff that I was dealing with. That got really, really bad because I'd lost a lot of the important muscle and collagen in the body. So, I'm trying to maintain weight, trying to, maintain a healthy body. And that's what I use the diet for. It's not here for entertainment. Food is not a drug for me anymore, and that's what I really like about it, right? It's like I've kind of transformed the relationship with food, and there are thousands of people out there, millions of people out there doing it with keto. As far as carnivore goes, probably not millions of people yet, but it sure is catching on, and a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life that I would have never met have contacted me and said, hey, thank you for putting out this information. I really appreciate it because it's changed my life and it's helped me get my health back. So yeah, we're not about creating a religion around diet. We're about teaching other people and ourselves how to properly feed and fuel the human body in this world that is constantly degenerating us physically, mentally, and spiritually. And I think a good clean diet is very important. I think people can become obsessed and they can make an idol out of diet. It's very easy for people to do. People make an idol out of anything. People worship rocks, and people yeah.
And I like your point that it's not a religion, it's not politics, and that there's freedom in this. Just as in the Orthodox Church, that we have rules and guidelines, but it's always in cooperation with the individual and their freedom. And that, again, the reason why we're standing up against the climate change cult or veganism is not because I'm taking a political side on issues. As clergy, I'm not allowed to engage in politics. And, I might think that certain things, are immoral or that's not a good idea, and won't speak up on that. But what I always remind people that I believe it's the duty of clergy that when people are coerced, when people's children are taken away because you don't subscribe to the LGBT narrative, when you don't, we're going to decide what you are going to eat and how we're going to regulate your life. We're going to put you in smart cities, and we're going to do, as clergy in the Orthodox Church, we have a responsibility without taking a political side on the issue to speak up for the innocent. Because there is no love without freedom. There is no virtue or good actions unless someone's free to do those things. And so when people are being coerced and when the food, the vegetarian is being politicized, forced upon people, I believe that I have a duty to speak up for the innocent and for freedom. And so that doesn't mean I'm taking a political side. I'm speaking up for human beings. And I know people always get that. They want to push you into those dialectics that, you must be this other political party. I'm not political at all.
I love it. These people, it's crazy. It's always, you're either a fascist or a commie, right? It's like if you the whole politics thing is, what about, all right, so as far as, clergy being non-political, I'm fascinated with the history of the Russian church in under communism and under the Soviet Union, right? So it's like, so the clergy being apolitical, but what happens when there are political movements that are inherently heretical, right? But like obviously satanic. I mean, it's how can the church push against these worldviews and these movements, right? Politics is just an extension of a worldview, right? It usually, yeah.
And by the way, I should qualify. It's not that clergy can't vote, but we keep that private.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be a sermon on, well, you got to vote for this person.
Yeah, if you don't vote for Hillary, you're going to, right. Like if you don't vote for Hillary, then you're super bad. Right. Yeah. I understand the importance of not being overtly political, choosing sides, organization, but it's so interesting to me when you look at the West and how decadent it is, and then like the history of the Byzantine Empire, of Byzantium, and the church's place there. Like what do you see? Do you have what do you see happening right now? Like as we move forward towards this like brave new world society that they're trying to progress us to, is progress. I mean, it seems like both sides of the political spectrum are so corrupted and so and so decadent. What can I don't even know what I'm asking at this point. What can we do to push back against this, right? Like obviously there's no political salvation. We're not looking for salvation in politics, but what happens?
We never encourage physical violent revolution as well.
Yeah.
That civil disobedience, absolutely, and that a spiritual revolution. So if you look, for example, under the Soviets and the Bolsheviks, that they murdered 350,000 of our priests, called them up and just slaughtered them, put the rest in concentration camps.
Exactly.
The gulags, and then inserted their own spies and stuff like that for the remnants that were.
Sorry, I just got a leg cramp. I played soccer earlier, and I sweated a bunch, and then I tried to pull my legs up, and I got double leg cramps in my. I got some Charlie horses right now. Sorry, I know I bumped the mic.
It's fun. But you had priests and bishops that, in the face of these mock trials, would speak up that it is not true. Just like I was saying, it's the duty of clergy when there's anti-human, anti-Christian ideologies that are specifically being forced on people. It's the duty of us clergy to speak up. For example, the Orthodox Church does not condone same-sex marriages and homosexual relations. Now, if like 25 years ago, they were saying we just want to keep this in the privacy of our own home, we wouldn't be saying anything. But when all of a sudden it gets put into legislation that, well, if you don't believe in this, you're going to receive, we're going to revoke your tax-exempt status, or we're going to take your children away, or we're going to make you go through these re-education sensitivity programs and stuff like this. And now I have a duty to speak up. So again, we love all people. We love the homosexuals, and we actually were the only ones that do. The world, if a parent said, hey, 3-year-old, 5-year-old, you want to smoke cigarettes and drink scotch, and sure, do it. That's not loving. And so it's not loving to say, well, if you feel that's love, if you feel that that's good for you, that's fine. That's not a loving attitude. But again, we're not going to use coercion. We're not going to use, violence. And they'll always accuse us, well, you saying that's the reason why that, people are acting violent. That's not true at all. But we are going to speak up when you're forcing your belief systems through coercion in law. I have to speak up at this point and say this is wrong. And it's the same with the diet. They're pushing these things with the climate change. So I need to make that clear. I'm not being political. I'm not being hateful. I'm being loving. I love all people are freely welcome to come and be healed within the church. And we're not going to force that on anybody, but we will speak up when the state, and we always have. Yeah. Even to the point of our martyrdom, as you see, many of the martyrs spoke up against the Bolsheviks. Same stuff was going on, and same tactics, and we laid our lives down in that type of spirituality of martyrdom, of emptying your whole self out for your brother, for humanity. For the scripture says, no greater love than a man lay his life down for his friend. And by praying and doing these things, this is how we overturned communism. This is how we overturned the Roman pagan empire that was persecuting Christians. So it's a grassroots. You want to get, you want a revolution. It's a spiritual revolution. This is what you increase your faith and asceticism, your prayers, and your outwardness, which is true love. And love does not mean nicety. It doesn't mean, it just have to be, that's love. Everybody just get along. Would that be a loving parent to say that? Sometimes,
it's like, if we all just have good vibes, it's like if we all just make each other happy, make everyone feel good. But it's like, in that worldview, if you just, if you just hook up everybody to a dopamine producing machine, then that's love, right? If you just give everybody a hot shot of heroin and some porn, like that'll make them feel good, man. It's like that's love, but that's not real love, right? That's just
that's a modern invention of the word happiness. The Greek word is eudaimonia, like eudaimon, but eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is another pronunciation of it. And it doesn't have anything to do with a feeling. It means human flourishing or being well. That the human beingness of you is being the way that it's supposed to be. Oftentimes, that's not pleasurable. And the modern retranslation of that through the project of modernity is to associate happiness not with human flourishing or being well, but pleasure, hedonism, hedon, right? That do whatever makes you feel well. So we're not here to say just feel however you want, feel well. That's satanic. We want, and the reason why we love all people is because we want all people to flourish. And we know that certain types of actions are destructive to the human being in society. And so we can't say everything is good. Everybody just, and it's incoherent ideology. Anyways, I was driving back from surfing today and this morning, and I saw the bumper sticker coexist. And I'm like, I love how it's not even consistent. They don't put the Nazi symbol in there, right? They don't put the Make America Great Trump on there. They're not a consistent ideology. It's, coexist. We want everybody to coexist, except for you guys.
Except for all the bigots who disagree with anything I say. Coexist, except for anybody who criticizes something that I don't want to be criticized.
We're so tolerant of all positions except for your position. Or just keep morality to yourself. Morality belongs to you as they moralize and teach you about morality. And so, again, this is a paradigm level. When you see a paradigm that's inconsistent and logically contradictory, don't buy into it. I always tell my students that, look, don't buy into a system that you can't live. And this is what's so upsetting to us about hypocrites. These people are hypocrites. Kid, don't smoke. That you're saying one thing and doing another. Mm-hmm. It's inconsistent, and nobody should buy into a system that they cannot consistently live out. And so all this New Age stuff, all this what's under the guise of tolerance is inconsistent, it's bigoted, and it's the most judgmental, hypocritical ideology out there.
But tolerates anything but real Christianity. Everything but real Christianity, right? As long as it's this watered down, nonsensical, and they'll tolerate the evangelicals or the Pope blessing Pachamama. That's all tolerable, but it's what they should change it to. It should the sticker should be, we'll have to make these, Father Deacon Ananias. We'll have to make the sticker will say coexist, comma, bigots. With an exclamation point. Coexist, bigots, with an exclamation point at the end. That's the new sticker for the for all these new agers cruising around. Hey, I've got a bunch of super chats here. A lot of people were dropping the super chats in the beginning.
Awesome.
You mind if we go through and read some of these?
Let's
There's
do
some
that.
questions in there as well. Let's see here. All right, loads of super chats. Here we go. Thanks, everybody, for keeping this. I know normally I'll answer the super chats as we go, but this has been such a fascinating conversation, and we had 3 people in it, so we didn't have time to hit on these as we were going through it. But I want to thank you guys all for supporting the channel. These do get regularly demonetized and hidden in the algorithm, so when you guys support it, it really makes it worth it coming on here and doing these long live streams. So thanks a lot for the support. Natasha sent quite a few. She sent $2 in the beginning, didn't even ask a question. Then she said, for $5, Natasha Mulkey says, veganism is the new cage hair shirt that promises salvation through human suffering. Cage hair shirt. What is a cage? Do you know what a cage hair shirt is?
I've never heard of one.
Maybe this was like an auto spell thing. Maybe it auto spelled it to her. Thank you, Natasha. Really appreciate it. Cowatarian's always sending those super chats. Thanks a lot. Sends $5. Says thanks, guys. And Natasha says cleanses for parasites are rooted in 3D body consciousness, which fails to address multidimensional, archonic, parasitic control. Natasha, thanks for the super chat. There's a lot in there. When you say archonic, you're that's a Gnostic term, right? I think you should definitely look into a little bit deeper into the Gnosticism and how actually how counterintuitive this is, and how self-refuting Gnosticism really is. Maybe check out some of Jay's content on Gnosticism. Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, have you done any chats on your channel, which is the Norwegian Nous? Guys, make sure to check out his channel, the Norwegian Nous. I'll put a link in the description of this video. Jessica, would you mind doing that? Do you have any any response to this question? Let me read it again. Cleanses for parasites are rooted in 3D body consciousness, which fails to address multidimensional, archonic, parasitic control.
Yeah, I think there's a video, like a documentary about that she's probably pulling from. What was that? I saw it probably about a year ago, and it's but you nailed it. It's actually Gnostic, and it's everything that Jay and I said, and Tristan in this chat, that why do we Orthodox reject Gnosticism? It's because it has an idea that evil is a substance, and that it's an incorrect theology that's incompatible with the divine revelation given to us in the Orthodox faith. And it has negative law. Ideas have consequences. Bad ideas have bad consequences. And it leads to Marcionism, that all the things that we talked about there. So I definitely recommend, Jay has a lot of great videos on Gnosticism, why it's incompatible with Orthodox Christianity. And we've been fighting the Gnostics from the beginning of the church. Yep. It just resurfaces in various forms. It is now in AI, in transhumanism, is thoroughly Gnostic too. And so we can't accept that.
Yeah. No, a lot of Gnostics believe that that God is actually the demiurge. They have this weird inverted theology, and Lucifer is the light bearer, and Lucifer enlightened us, and that we're going to become enlightened through our own actions and through our intellect. And if we just get all the data together, then we'll figure this all out, and we will be enlightened, and through our own knowledge, we'll get salvation through knowledge, which is an inversion, right? It's not like knowledge is bad. It's not like knowledge should be rejected, but it has to be put in its proper place in the hierarchy, right? So
absolutely.
All right. So we've got So David sends 3 $2 super chats. Just says free super chat with each one of those. Thanks a lot, David, for the free super chats. Natasha said we're a virus with shoes. I guess maybe she was talking about the when we were talking about the what was it called, the vegan ideology that says that we're a cancer on the earth. We're such a virus.
Right.
Yeah, so we reject that idea that we're a virus, right? Human beings, we believe that man is made in the image and likeness of God, and we're not a virus on the earth. In fact, all of creation, the earth was actually created for man, if I'm not mistaken. Is that how we see it?
That's right.
Yeah. So how could we be a virus if this was created for us? How could we be a virus if we're made in the image and likeness of God? Thank you for the super chat, guys. David sent another $5 super chat. Thanks a lot. Natasha says, go vegan and do yoga. It's good for a goy. All right, Natasha, do some yoga. Yeah, so the yoga, definitely one of those, another one of these things. Like, no, it's not like it's bad to stretch, right? But like the ideology and all the stuff that comes along with yoga and union with the divine through yoga, it seems it's kind of another one of those Western kind of like schismatic movements. What do you think about the yoga movement?
Yeah, so it's important to understand that in terms of paradigm in the history of this, that these movements are designed to open you up to certain spirits. Now, people could say, "Well, I've separated that, and I don't do that. I just do the stretches." So I'm extremely suspicious of that. I'm actually just suspicious of anything that becomes too popular. But there's a lot of great videos that I could refer you to where the fathers and the holy elders talk about this. And the other question too is that even if you think that you're not engaged in this, what about the other people joining around in yoga? I'm telling you that every surfer out there was surfing and doing occultic practices, and they thought that they were summoning the demons. I probably wouldn't be surfing anymore as much as I love it.
There you go.
I find another form of exercise.
Yeah, and if you had to wear yoga pants while surfing, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias probably wouldn't do it either. All right, so Natasha, thanks a lot for the super chats. Walrus Lulbertarian says, new to Orthodoxy, how do you guys deal with keto and fasting twice a week and the month-long fast? So we kind of talked about this earlier. Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, you want to?
Yeah, so again, first principle, go speak with your spiritual father, your father confessor, and just bring up your concerns and address. We're not legalistic, especially when it comes to health. The health of the person is always first and foremost. The importance, and your spiritual father has the spiritual insight and experience to know how to deal with that. They may have you fast in different ways. Fast from other certain foods, because the end at which fasting is trying to obtain is a discipline and control over one's passions. And so the priest will know, he is the doctor and the physician of souls, and will know how to get you to that end. So I always go to your spiritual father.
Great. All right. Thanks a lot, man. All right. Miras Nous sends, what is that, Australians? I think that's Australian. It says 5 Australians, not people, dollars, are only those who practice orthodoxy going to heaven, and the rest of us condemned to hell. I escaped the Jehovah's Witness cult and now find it hard to believe in God. Oh, that's a really good question.
That's a great question. So we don't have, again, Western thought's plagued with this dialectics, the one and the many, and they're opposed. They're form and matter, right and left, in or out, saved or unsaved, elect or reprobate. We don't have those dialectics. In fact, the very term salvation, because again, each word means something entirely different according to somebody's paradigm. In Orthodoxy, we don't interpret salvation the way that the West does. It's not an in or out. Salvation is relational. And we can say that we're all being saved, right? So we'll be nuanced on the word what salvation means. All of us, even those who don't believe, are being saved because they're given life. There's time to repent. There's time to improve. That's a type of salvation. And as you grow in your relationship with God and open your heart and respond, you can grow farther into that salvation. And ultimately, it's a mystery. How far people get within that salvation, I don't know, but it's very similar to a marriage. And marriage is actually given is the metaphor for what salvation with the bride of Christ and the church is supposed to be. And I could say, I remember the day I was married, that I made a commitment towards my wife. But I don't say, all done, I'm married. I don't have to do any work anymore. Nothing on the relationship, right? It's a sealed, this is a juridical Western kind of concept. So I remember when I was married.
My wife's listening right now, dude. Don't remind her. What are you doing, man? Don't
you need
back up. No, I'm just kidding.
I remember the day I was married. I'm still being in the process of working in that marriage, and I look to be married in the future. You can make the same analogy with salvation. I remember the day I was saved, if we're talking about in the sense of giving yourself to Christ within the church. But you have to work. You have to work on that relationship. And so I was saved, I'm being saved, and I look forward to being further saved within. So it's not an in or out. And everybody has free will to how they want to respond to God's love. And what we say is hell's not actually a place. It's a state and relation. In fact, hell is the inability to receive love and reciprocate it. Whether that be between your neighbor, your family members, you can be in a state of hell. It's obviously in the very end going to be solidified and much worse. But you're going to say, you're not going to be surprised. Oh, if I just knew more, then I could have been. Those who are in a state of hell in the eschaton will say, that's exactly who I thought God was, and I want nothing to do it, and I'd rather be suffering now in relation to that. It's an inability to receive the love and reciprocate it out, and that is the very definition of hell.
So it's not like God. It's not like God just created this, this torture chamber where it's like anybody who doesn't fulfill certain legalistic, if you don't, if you step on the crack, you break your mama's back. If you do this, you're gonna, you go to hell. I think the Catholic thing really. When I was a kid, I had a Catholic, like part of our family, like my uncle, he was Catholic, so I kind of learned a little bit about what Catholics believed from, not even from him, but like from asking my parents and stuff. But I just hearing about like purgatory and all these weird ideas that they had, it really turned me off to Christianity in general, right? I mean, I always believed, I never overtly denied God. Maybe at times in my life I was very, very confused and lost and into all the like occult and esoteric stuff, but I never denied that there could be God or that God existed. But I think a lot of these legalistic things in Catholicism and in some of the ways that, like, you mentioned harvest, because you and I were talking before about Greg Laurie, and in Southern California growing up, I had exposure to a lot of the Harvest Crusade people. Some of my neighbors went to that church, and but just there's so many weird ideas in a lot of these churches that really turned me off. But Orthodoxies, it's just crazy reading the church fathers and talking to other people in Orthodoxy, especially converts. It seems like a lot of people who grew up in it don't really understand as much as a lot of the converts do. But I've learned so much about theology from people like yourself and Jay, and it amazes me that all of these things that were stumbling blocks for me had already been discussed and clarified by the church fathers in such a beautiful way. And it's just, I haven't found one thing that seems untrue in Orthodoxy. Like there's not a single thing that I've learned so far in my journey that offends me in any way. It's just it rings so true.
Praise God.
Yeah, it's a real blessing to.
I'll do a stream on that too later. I just want to go through the rest of the super chats, but cool. I think that'll be a good one to.
Yeah, I read Father Seraphim Rose's book, and I know that this isn't like, maybe he has some ideas. He says in his book, Life After, what is it called? Life After Death, Jessica? She's listening to headphones.
What?
Seraphim Rose's book about after death?
Yeah.
Life after death, is that what it's
Yeah.
called? Okay. Father Seraphim Rose's book, Life After Death, is really, really fascinating, and that clarified a lot of things for me. And what do you think about that book? Would you recommend that one?
Yeah, always Father Seraphim Rose. I can't recommend him enough.
Cool. All right, so we got caught up in that super chat. Let's see. Let's go. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Natasha says, all vegans go to heaven. The mantra of the New Cage movement. Oh, there you go. The New Cage movement. I like that one.
Yeah.
All right, $5. Andrew Herbst just sent $5. Thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it. Thomas W says, Jay, is it true you're going to be doing a stream with Vox Day? Epic if you are. Jay's not here to answer that. Sorry, Thomas. Next stream I'll try to be more timely with answering the super chats. Natasha sends $20. Thank you so much, Natasha. Very generous donation there. Says, as a targeted individual, I eat carnivore as a means of resistance, considering fat and cholesterol are electrical insulators that protect against things like nanoparticles that permeate the blood-brain barrier and 5G. So I'm just talking about environmental pollutants, whether that be physical or electromagnetic. Yeah, proper diet, definitely a way to strengthen the body. Will diet lead us to salvation? Absolutely not, but we can definitely strengthen our body and our ability to handle environmental stressors through proper diet. That's definitely true. Thank you, Natasha. Appreciate that. She says, Natasha again. Look at that. Natasha's just keeping look, all these super chats coming from Natasha. Thank you very much. Says, sin equals sign. You are born into simulation. That sounds like another Gnostic thing, doesn't it?
Gnostic.
Simulation theory?
Yeah.
What do you think about simulation theory?
It is false. Again,
but how do you know that the simulation didn't program you to think that it's false?
so we do a transcendental presuppositional argument, and we're able to. Our starting point is not autonomous man trying to figure these things out, or skepticism and coming up with these theories. But as it says in scriptures, God is the Lord who has revealed himself to us. This is our starting point of our divine revelation. So we know that there's no simulation theory because we have the fullness of truth delivered to us from the saints.
There we go. All right, Natasha, thanks a lot. She says ethical vegans are crypto commies. I don't know. I couldn't really refute that. A lot of them don't really realize what they're doing. I think a lot of these vegans don't realize that they are engaging in kind of a Bolshevik-style revolution globally right now against peasants and small family farmers, and in some places trying to create kind of a new Holodomor type situation. And the 5G rollout and the smart city grid and all this stuff does seem to be pushing towards that, which is very, very alarming. So I gotta agree with you there. She also says fasting is like a do-it-yourself fecal transplant via your gut biome to regenerate new stem cells. All right, it's an interesting theory. Morality perpetuates dualistic consensus reality that feeds the archonic control grid that's keeping us locked in this frequency prison, says Natasha. Again with the transhumanist kind of archon talk and the Gnostic talk. Definitely disagree with Gnosticism. Thanks a lot, though, Natasha. She says, can y'all discuss iron mixing with clay in relation to transhumanism and the global vegan agenda? You're talking about the quote in Revelation, but you have anything to say about that, Father Deacon Ananias? Yeah, look, there's so many. Yeah. Thank you so much, Natasha. Really appreciate it. Zolo Mexicano. I like that name. It's like Cholo, but with an X instead of CH. I like that. Cholo Mexicano says, sends $10. Thanks a lot, man. Says, what is your experience with iridology, with its connection to the lymphatic system and use of herbs to cleanse the body? Frugivore diet is bunk, but this appears to be true from experience. All right, so iridology is the idea that your eyes, and if you take a close-up picture of your eyes, that you could kind of diagnose certain things by just looking at the eye. I don't really buy into the fact that someone's going to diagnose you by looking into your eye, but I wouldn't deny that. Yeah, the eyes give a lot of information. right? So I don't think that we're ultimately, as fallen, kind of confused beings, are going to figure out all the information that's coming through the eyes. We can't even, I don't know, we're very lost and confused in many different ways. So I don't think that this is like a hard science or anything that they're going to, you're going to diagnose everything with iridology. I don't know. I mean, I'm open to it. I'm not like closed off to the idea. I haven't seen that much information on it. I just see a lot of vegans saying, "Oh, look, my eyes turned blue because I ate all fruit for a year and now I'm amazing and I'm about to ascend." So yeah, thank you. Herbs to cleanse the body. Yeah, herbs, plants, medicine. There are a lot of medicines in the plant world, and they can be useful. And I'm not trying to talk bad about plants as medicine, but then there are also people that get way too into the stuff and they cleanse themselves to death, basically, right? So be careful. Anything can become like an idol, basically. I mean, you look at the certain plants that will put you in altered states and put you in contact with entities, which are demonic. So I don't think that all plants are gonna. All plant medicines are so great or anything. I think these things have their place. I mean, opium has its use, right? Like it's a powerful pain reliever, but also, I mean, you can smoke opium all day, then you're gonna be a degenerate and you're gonna waste your life away. So, yeah. What about the use of like plants in medicine? Is an interesting topic. Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, yeah, do you have anything to say about that? Plants and herbs as medicine, because a lot of people get into like witchcraft and stuff, and they get into I'm going to channel the spirits. I'm going to make my cauldron full of herbs, and I'm going to do this stuff. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you separate it from these cults and these ideologies, and as Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine. That you use the herbs is medicine. There's nothing wrong with that. We've done that within the church. But we don't attribute a religious significance outside of Orthodoxy. We're not trying to contact spirits or doing some type of shamanic practices or something like that. We can't engage in that.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, right? So it's like, if there's certain plants that are powerful, can be used as medicines, but don't worship the shamans and like go into this like crazy witchcraft stuff. Yeah, there's so many people in South America. A lot of Westerners come down to South America to try and do the plant medicine, and they end up getting like a lot of people get really screwed up with this stuff. So whenever I see people talk about plant medicines, my experience with a lot of people that are in that world, I've seen a lot of people damaged on many levels from it, and but that doesn't mean that plants are bad. All right, so people get offended. They're like, "Oh, you mean like, look, man, like I ate mushrooms and I had a good experience, and then I converted to Christianity afterwards. And are you saying that I'm bad?" Like, no, I'm not saying that like nothing good can come from anything. But I'm just, these things were used ritualistically in a specific way in these cultures, and it was I don't know, like they're like human sacrifice cults. They're eating mushrooms, and the demons are telling them to chop off people's heads and eat their hearts and stuff. So, yeah.
Look at Midsummer, the movie. They use mushrooms in their cult sacrifices, and so just don't associate with that shamanic pagan nonsense.
The shamans are gonna save you. No, they're not. The shamans are gonna probably feel you up and take your money. That's what they're gonna do. They want to touch your ladies and take your money. All right, so Natasha, thanks for the super chat. Natasha says alkaline and mucus-free diets leave you prone to 5G and Lego locking nanoparticle tech. that's funny. So alkaline and mucus-free diet, she's saying that's gonna screw you up. Now, the whole like mucus-free thing is ridiculous, but hey, I grew up just my face was always like mucus coming out of my nose, and I can breathe a lot better now. So I appreciate the less mucus production that I have from dietary interventions. I think that's really cool. But yeah, we do need some mucus, like in our gut. We have mucus.
Yep.
I know you mentioned you had allergies too, that you'd get plugged up. So, oh, it's the worst. Well, not the worst. I don't want to say it, but it's no fun. All right. So, Shining Diamond says thoughts on the Bolivian coup. Well, that's a long one. That's quick question with a long answer. I mean, these things are all very nuanced. The Bolivian coup. I mean, it's obvious. You look at what happened in Bolivia. There's a the U.S. based organization that was supposedly monitoring the election. It's the same script that they run everywhere, right? If
It's
there's an
the
election
same
that
CIA script. Yep.
Exactly. So if the election benefits the CIA and the Fortune 100 and the mining companies and the oil companies that want to extract the resources from a country, if it benefits them and it's going to bring in neoliberal policies and it's going to privatize everything, and if it allows the big banks to rip off a country, then it's a good election. If not, there was what do they say? Massive fraud, massive election fraud. So I mean, it's a real shame what happened in Bolivia. Pray for the people of Bolivia, pray for the people in Chile, pray for all of South America, because they're two. When these things happen, then there's always a big push from communist organizers and from other ideologies to try and organize people, and ultimately, I think it's a spiritual problem that we have, and it's not going to be solved politically. And I feel bad for the people in Bolivia. South Americans are really cool people. A lot of Westerners, North Americans. They look at people all the time tell me, why you moved to a third world country. Well, I live in a third world country because these people are awesome. Like, I go play soccer with the high school kids. I can go every day if I can't go every day because I'll kill myself. But I could go every day and play soccer at 5 o'clock in the afternoon with a bunch of really cool high school kids. And we've got families still really big in South America. Like, the poorest people I've ever met are usually like the most simple, humble, happy people. So
yes. Yeah, I lived in South America for a year in Buenos Aires and Panama. Visit Panama, stayed in Panama for a while, but Buenos Aires, Argentina, Brazil, great people.
I love South. It's such a beautiful place, and culturally, it's different from the West, right? Catholicism's really big in South America. So I don't know. It's funny that the Amazon Synod thing happened right as all these coups are happening. It's kind of a weird coincidence.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think about the Amazon Synod and Pachamama and the Pope and all that stuff?
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah, it's. I encourage my Roman Catholic brothers to come on home. That this is evidence that that's departed from the truth.
Do you think they're gonna? We're gonna see? It seems like a lot of Catholics are fed up with it now, right? Do you think we're going to see more people?
Yeah, like my trad Catholic friends will be like, well, there's movements against, we're rising up, but it doesn't matter because the same thing's going to happen in Vatican II. They're still bound by both the extraordinary and ordinary magisterium. The Pope could just excommunicate them and they'll become schismatic sedevacantists, just like it did after Vatican II. So what I show is that you don't have a type of ecclesiology to deal with these problems. Orthodoxy has a very different type of decentralized ecclesiology of autocephaly and conciliarity that allows us, when a bishop gets infected with heresy and problems and being manipulated by CIA and NATO and UN and stuff like that, we can deal with that. We can cut them off because the Catholicity and fullness of the faith doesn't reside in one and only one bishop, the Bishop of Rome, but each bishop has the full Catholicity, the fullness of faith within the Orthodox faith. So we could cut them off and excommunicate them without the whole system becoming gangrenous. And Rome doesn't have a paradigm to deal with that. So it doesn't matter that there's good-meaning Catholics that realize this is heresy, and they don't have a mechanism to deal with it, and it's unfortunate. Because they departed from the true faith. That the ecclesiology was established by Christ for the first 1,000 years, they departed from that, and that's why they're having problems.
Makes sense. All right, so let's see. We got another super chat here. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Natasha says, my point is veganism is rooted in materialism, which, yeah, I would agree. Most vegans, they root their ideology in materialism, and then they want to use ethical arguments for their materialistic ideology, which is self-contradictory and
Tristan, I'm going to have to depart. You want to read just maybe one more? Or?
We're almost to the end. Sorry, we saved them all.
No,
we saved them all from the. All right, so last keep on keeping on. Someone says you're doing God's work, and then let's see. Cholo Mexicano, last one. He says, "I'm Orthodox too. Fear not, Christ is my Lord." Wait, I think there might be one more. Sorry, let's see. Where'd it go? No, I think that's it. I think that's the last super chat. I think we got them all, man. Yeah, it's been a great talk. It's been a long one. We've done a little bit over 3 hours. Yeah, it's been really nice. So you guys make sure to check out Jay Dyer's channel and also Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, which is the Norwegian Nous. And yeah, you got any last words for the audience?
Blessings, brothers and sisters of our Lord Jesus Christ. May He keep you and protect you from all evils. And thank you so much for having me, Tristan. And I can't wait to be on the next stream with you.
Yep, it's been great. We've got a lot more that we could talk about. We've got a lot more that we can expand on. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks to everybody for keeping the chat alive, for sending all those super chats. Really appreciate that. And I want to thank everybody who's donated recently. Oh, Jessica reminded me last stream, but I forgot to announce it. What was the... TransferWise. Okay, so somebody said get TransferWise for donations. We listened. We got TransferWise, so if you look underneath in the description of this video, there's a link for the donations page, and TransferWise is there, and then also like PayPal and all that stuff. And big announcements coming soon, a lot of big changes coming to the channel. Really, really cool stuff coming, so I want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you so much to Jay Dyer and Father Deacon Dr. Ananias from the Norwegian Nous YouTube channel, and thank you everybody for watching. God bless. Have a great night, everybody.